It is 9 o'clock. Call to order, councillors. We're all here. So good morning, everyone. And as always, before we begin, if you could please turn your mobile devices, phones, iPads to silent. So thank you for that. Welcome community members, visitors, our media rep, again, it's good to see community members join us at our March 2019 council meeting. Many of you have been here before. I think nearly all of you have been here before, so you understand that this is an open meeting of council for council to observe the councillors in their decision-making process. Speakers are identified by the chair to speak. Silence is requested during the public forum and presentation items and whilst council is in session. No one in the room has parliamentary privilege. Any debate, remarks or gallery interaction needs to keep that in mind. And our code of meeting practice includes live streaming as part of what we do. Therefore, I need to inform all present that council permits the electronic recording and broadcasting of the proceedings of the meetings of council, which are open to the public. Your attendance at this meeting is taken as consent to the possibility that your image and or voice may be recorded and broadcast to the public. For the people in the gallery to follow the agenda, it will be screened on the large screen just to my right. Everyone is welcome to join us for morning tea, and that is normally at around 10:30. This morning we have 3 public forum presentations. The first one will be Madeleine Holtmann on item 13.2, which is the residential apartment at Crescent Head. She'll be speaking against. And then we'll have Kurt Crisp speaking on item 13.2, same item, and he'll be speaking for. Dr. Nona, Harvey and Mandy will speak jointly on item 15.1, which is the climate change policy and action notice of motion. Councillors, just a reminder that questions must be on the agenda item being discussed only. They need to be direct, succinct and without argument or debate, and any answer given to a question is not open for argument or debate. So welcome councillors, General Manager, Director and staff. This morning, following item number 1, we will just suspend standing orders and pay respect and honour to community members. But we will begin the meeting this morning with item number 1, which is the opening prayer. Dear Lord, help us in our deliberation today so that our decisions will be made for the greater good of the whole Kempsey Shire. Amen. And our traditional welcome to country, which is acknowledgement of country. Council acknowledges that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Dunghutti people. So I'm just going to suspend standing orders, and I'd just like to say to the community that earlier this month we said goodbye to May Gill. May's contribution to the Macleay Valley and her service in the SES, not only here but New South Wales wide, was extraordinary. We are blessed to have had May in our community through her lively conversation, her love of family and friends, and her dedication to duty, no matter what the situation, and we will sorely miss May. Likewise, our community will say goodbye to another well-regarded community member on Friday, Uncle Bob, Uncle Blue, Harold Smith. He was an Aboriginal elder, a proud Dunghutti man, and recognised as a local citizen of the Macleay Valley. And he was also a friend. Uncle Blue's funeral will be held on Friday. So if everyone could please stand and we pause for a few minutes silence and remember and pay tribute to community leaders May Gill and Uncle Blue. Thank you, everyone. We have apologies. We have two apologies this morning. We have apologies from Councillor Ashley Williams and from Councillor Dean Saul. Moved Councillor Shields, seconded Councillor Morris. Yes.
Because you should say that, because it comes out in a minute.
That will be the motion. All in favour of the motion? Thank you. That's been carried. Any declarations of interest, councillors? No declarations of interest. Assessment of items listed for confidential consideration. Thank you, councillor. Move Councillor McGinn, seconded Councillor Patterson. All in favour? That's carried. Confirmation of minutes. There are two attachments for ordinary meeting 18th of December and the 19th of February. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. It's been seconded by Councillor McGinn, and the procedural motion is?
That the meeting minutes be treated separately. We wish to amend one.
We will take that. So the item, which ones are they?
Need a seconder first.
Oh, I need a seconder for the procedural motion, sorry. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morris. All in favour of treating them separately for an amendment? Well, I don't know what it is, so I have to... Yeah. If you could just do the amendment, then we can move them all both together.
Okay, well, the amendment is the 19th February meeting, concerning my motion of dissent. So I'd like to put into the minutes that Councillor Holtmann moved dissent in the ruling to allow the procedural motion moved by Councillor McGinn. And the General Manager stated there is no motion of dissent without the Mayor seeking advice to rule dissent out of order. That's my motion.
Do I have a seconder for the... all in favour of accepting the amendment? All against accepting the amendment? The amendment has been lost. So we go back to the original minutes. All in favour of the minutes?
Madam Mayor, do I have my light on? So
oh, sorry, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor. Yes, Councillor Morris.
I would just ask them, mover and the second, that they amend or that they change their motion, that it not be the minutes that are actually attached to this agenda, but it's the minutes that were distributed by email on Monday, which had a minor change to the minutes from the 18th of December.
You agree?
Yes.
Seconder? Thank you. All in favour of accepting the minutes, confirmation of minutes? All against? Councillor Baxter? Thank you. There is no citizenship ceremony. We will move straight into public forum. And our first speaker this morning is Madeleine Holtmann. So, Madeleine, if you would come forward, please. Speaking on item 3.2, you have 5 minutes to deliver your deposition, and then there will be questions. There will be a sound. The minutes will be played on the screen, and I think you'll still sound the bell at 4 minutes. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors and Madam Mayor, for allowing me to speak. I'm addressing you today to ask that you decline consent for the 4-storey, 15-unit apartment building that is proposed for the vacant land across the road from my home at 10 Baker Drive, Crescent Head. I've owned this home for 26 years. I raise my children there, and I'm attached to the idea of living there when I'm elderly. However, the proposed building that is before you today will profoundly affect the enjoyment of my home. This building exceeds the Kempsey Local Environment Plan 2013 height restrictions by at least 2.4 metres and does not meet setback requirements. These breaches mean that my house and yard will lose sunlight and privacy. Professional advice from a licensed real estate agent indicates that the value of my property and those surrounding the proposed development will decrease by at least 25% because of the loss of privacy, loss of on-street parking, potential noise issues, and the inherent change in the streetscape due to the overbearing nature of the building, its height, density and bulk. Although I despair at the thought of these impacts on my own home, I recognise that it's likely to be even worse for some of the other neighbouring properties. High-density accommodation of this sort is typically not attractive to long-term residents or families who choose to live outside of the city. In a phone conversation with Shane Reinhold, he agreed that these apartments are likely to be used as holiday rentals. Holiday rentals can result in noise issues and antisocial behaviours. Holiday makers place an increased burden on local facilities, but offer nothing to the social fabric of the community. They don't enrol children in schools or volunteer in local organisations such as the Surf Club or Fire Brigade. I've yet to hear from anyone who feels that this will be a good addition to our village, but there were many community members who took the time to write submissions against it. Over 200 signed a petition and many more voiced views against it on social media. Why would councils, planning officers recommend approval when so many in the community are against the proposal and when such extensive variations to the CLEP are required? How can these people, the developers, have so much more influence and importance than those residents? I have to suspect that council officers are working with the developers to overcome the issues associated with the original building design that was approved.
Point of order, you need to stick to not to get denigrating council staff or councillors. Thank you.
That they are working to the building in 2005, the approval. I know that there are problems with that design and in particular the underground car park. I actually raised these very issues in my objection to the DA when I addressed the council meeting in 2004. The proposal was never going to be cost effective or realistic. If it was clear to me, someone with no engineering knowledge, why wasn't it clear to council's officers or to the applicant? The owners that applied for the existing DA is also the applicant for the current proposal. Nothing has changed from 2005 when the developers convinced council to approve the design with the underground car park. But now that they realise the associated expenses, we, that is myself, my neighbours and the broader Crescent Head community, are expected to pay the social, environmental and economic costs for their bad planning. Somehow the developers have managed to convince council's planning officers to recommend approval of a building that breaches the CLEP and the Crescent Head master plan and is too high and too dense for this location. Council should work to maintain residents' property values and the village environment rather than make decisions that are based on maximising developer profits. I appreciate that you councillors undertook the site visit. However, it is a shame that there wasn't a balloon raised to show the true height of the proposed building. The 3D plan provided to councillors at the site inspection is flawed as it overstates the height of surrounding properties and understates the height of the proposed development. I fear that post-approval variations will push the height even further, and as it is, the drawings do not show the height of the slab incorporated. I understand that the owners of this block are entitled to build a 3-storey building, and therefore if the building met the requirements of the CLEP, I would not be able to object. But to allow such extensive variations will establish dangerous and detrimental precedents that will be used to support similar breaches of planning laws in other locations. I fear it will be the thin edge of the wedge. At the very least, this building should have the top storey removed so that the height restrictions are adhered to, or otherwise let the current DA stand. It should also be noted that for me and many others, the reorientation of the building was not an improvement. In making your decision today, I urge you to consider how you would feel and how you would vote if this building was to be built across the road or next door to your own home or the home of someone you cared about. I want to believe that you care about me and the other affected residents.
Second.
All in favour of an extension? Thank you.
Thank you. I want to believe that you care about me and the other affected residents more than you care about the financial interests of the developers. I've been told that the architect will be given the opportunity to address council after me, and I question why, given that this building has no effect on his environment or on his life. He has nothing to lose if this building is approved. He will not have to live next door to it, nor have his environment or financial values detracted as a result of the proposed development. Council officers have too easily dismissed residents' concerns. The preschool made submissions...
I have to call you point of order again. You need to stick to your...
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand, or I don't understand that. The preschool made submissions and raised concerns about parking and traffic issues. I know there was a submission from a respected local engineer. The report fails to justify, is this wrong to say this? The report just fails, in my mind, to justify council's staff reasons for supporting a non-complying development and uses unsubstantiated statements such as, and I quote, "There is sufficient environmental planning grounds to justify the variation." The report does not give balanced consideration to the local environment of Crescent Head and the impacts that the variations to council development standards will have on the community. The report unreasonably justifies the compromising of development standards as being acceptable because some other standards are complied with. This makes little sense to me and is poor environmental planning. In summary, for myself and my neighbours, approval of this building will be devastating and costly, and feedback from the broader community indicates that many feel this building would be detrimental to the village as a whole. So again, I urge you to please respect and consider the impact of the building on the residents rather than thinking about the cost for the developers. That is something that they should have considered when they put forward their original plan in 2005. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Don't go away, don't go away. I have 2 lights on for questions. Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madeleine. 2 questions. Just on the point about whether it will be used for residents to live there, would you agree that the 24-odd flats that are down Kaluk are all used by permanent residents in the village?
I think that Condo Court or whatever it is
the 2 blocks, yeah. Condo Court, yeah. Yeah,
and I think Tea Trees is holiday rented. Not all of the units, but some of them are holiday rented. I know that I have had a friend stay in a holiday rental there.
Okay, secondly, can I ask...
and Condo Court is like a fairly unattractive proposition for holiday rentals.
Right.
Overall.
All right. Secondly, do you realise that if this proposal is knocked back, we go back to the first DA? The owners can build the first DA, which would be more, which some would say has a greater impact on the residents on the 2 boundaries.
I understand that would be the legal ruling. I think it would be unlikely that the developers would build that original building because of the associated costs and troubles that are actually outlined in the council officer's report, that the fact that there would need to be constant pumping of the car park, it is quite an unrealistic proposition. Along with the associated building costs, there will also be quite significant on-cost to any strata fees because of the energy and requirements and the risk of litigation should things fail. And so I think that should that have to go back to the original DA, I suspect that it'll never be built. It was, the property was on the market for some time with that construction certificate, and obviously it didn't sell, and I suspect it was because it was seen by people that it was too expensive and an unfeasible build. And now the developers are using that flawed DA and that flawed construction certificate to argue that they should be allowed to push the whole building above ground. And a much more feasible solution would be to push the building above ground but take off the 4th floor. Just have a 3-storey building. It is only greed that pushes it to go to the 4th floor. If they put in that DA and it goes to the 3rd floor and meets the height restrictions, although it still pushes against setbacks and so forth, it would be much harder for myself or for any others in the community to complain. But if they go to that 4th floor, it's going to set a precedent. And there's that other block that is in Kaluk Crescent, the vacant block. I believe it's owned by the church, but I could be wrong. And they will eventually sell that. and then that building will go to 4 stories. And for those apartments that are in Kaluk, those villas that are in Kaluk Crescent, they're going to be pushed up against 2 4-story buildings, let alone if Mainski, if that's similar there, then all the people that have developed and the the white one with the blue roof, they've done a very sensitive development there. But all the ones that have developed mindfully of the flat landscape are just going to be overshadowed by these huge buildings that are just, they're just pushing against the planning laws to get this extra story. Just take off that top floor and then everything's solved. They don't have to build the original DA, but to allow them to go to 4 stories, what's going to stop everybody else from going to 4 stories? And before we know it, we'll be living in Foster or, Gold Coast, God help us. Excuse me.
Okay.
But thank you. Councillor Holtmann.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Madeleine. It's quite informative. A couple of things you said that I would like to know more about. You talked about the Crescent Head perspective on, and I presume you're talking about the Crescent Head area master plan that Council drew up. How does that master plan be contravened or not contravened, in your opinion?
Well, I know that there are a few points. One is that the master plan does state that that buildings and development should be in keeping with the village atmosphere, the low-scale village atmosphere. And I noted in the council report that they spoke about that this proposed building doesn't impinge on the fishing shack, I don't know, style or something, that is visible from the village and foreshore, but it will definitely impact on the fishing shack, which my house was an original fishing shack, that it will definitely impose on that and that's on the gateway to the back beaches, which is obviously, as you know, very valued by not just Crescent Head residents, but many people from around the world. So that was one of it. And I think there's another one that says about that buildings should be of a bulk, I don't have them in front of me, I'm sorry, but something along the lines of being in the right bulk and density to fit in with the local environment. And this building, I recognise that there are the other condo court and tea trees, but they are built up back into the hill. This one is going to stand out like a, pimple on a sore thumb. And
Thank you. There's no more questions.
Yes, I have another question, Madam Mayor. You mentioned the height in your presentation, Madeleine, and then you talked about the fact that it appears that the slab hasn't been incorporated into that height. If the slab is added, what extra height would be added to the building? Do you know anything about that?
Well, I'm not an engineer, obviously, and I found it interesting that the whole development proposal does not actually deal with how the building is going to be embedded onto the block of land. And I spoke to somebody about this because, I've watched enough grand designs to know that once you're building on land like that, which is infill and it really is very close to the water table there, that I know that once you start to dig into it, people get all these sort of problems with raising water into their thing. So I asked somebody how they're going to do it, and they suggested that probably what they would do is put a great big, perhaps a 600 mil slab. And when I looked at the building's plans that were sent to me, they show it at ground level, like that the car park will be at ground level. But it obviously can't just be at ground level. There has to be a slab or some kind of thing. And so I'm guessing that perhaps that might be up to 600 mil, and therefore the building would then be going up to 3 metres high. I've also 3 metres above the building code, and my understanding is also that once if it's passed, that then the certifiers or the builders can keep on seeking variations, so there can be death by degrees, and it can just be keeping on going up, and before we know it, it goes even higher. And as it is now, my place will be overshadowed in winter, and I fear that every little bit of that will, you know, push out more and more of my winter sun, let alone just will not be able to be in my house and ignore that building. It will be so overbearing on my home and that of all the neighbours. Obviously, as I say, I'm not the worst affected.
Yeah. Thank you. Just one final question. How will the extra 80 vehicles a day, according to the report, travelling in and out of the development affect you?
Oh, well, it'll affect the traffic, you're saying, sorry?
Yes.
It'll affect me hugely. Well, not just me, it'll affect everybody. I read in the report they estimate 80 vehicle movements a day, 80 additional vehicle movements a day. It could well, I guess that's probably conservative. As it is now, because I've lived there, I've seen the vehicle movements that go about, particularly before and after school time. It's heavy and it's kind of somewhat chaotic. I live right on the school zone. So as it is now, I have no on-street parking because, in school zone times, because my whole front of my place is with the school zone. That's okay, but I also take my grandkids to and fro from school, and I find that the crossing is quite difficult in the morning. In the afternoon, the kids are shown across the road by a teacher, but in the morning, the kids are crossing independently. I fear that, particularly because the setback is encroached on, so the setback was meant to be, my understanding, I think 4 or 5 metres, and they've gone to 2 metres from the street. So that means that there's less visibility when turning out of that street. They won't be able to see so much the kids that are coming from the crossing because of that. I even once, some years back, when Tom Vermeulen was engineer, he actually asked me, and quite politely, and I was happy to adhere, he asked if I would cut back some of the trees growing over onto the my verge, I suppose you would say, so that it would give better visibility for cars coming out of the road. And I quite willingly did that, but it's interesting to note now that with the diminishment of this setback, that such a consideration isn't so important. And when there is such heavy traffic of young children, and because of the village nature of Crescent Head, many children do walk to school without their parents. You know, maybe not infants, but certainly 7, 8-year-olds are walking to school without their parents. And I fear also, again, if it's holiday rentals, then there's people that are going to be less aware of that use of the environment, and that they'll be perhaps more careless, and also, as we know, there is parking provision in the building, but most homes have more than one car. So of course there's going to be all that spill from the second car or the extra car is going to be all on the street frontage, and that therefore also changes the visibility, any cars that are parked. I think it's going to be quite difficult to police that and to keep cars off.
Thank you for answering the question. I'll take one more question. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madeleine, for your presentation today. It is a fantastic place, Crescent Head, to live. It also is a place that does require development, I believe. Because of the, this is a question, Madam Mayor. Do you think in developing Crescent Head, council could help to bring more population to the town by more students in the primary school, which won't lose teachers, by getting a police station back again, by developing the town with proper design that suits Crescent Head as a holiday destination, but above all, as a residential destination for people to live there. Do you think Crescent Head needs that, or do you think that Crescent Head should stay how it is?
No, I don't. I've enjoyed Crescent Head as it is, but it is unrealistic to think that you can just keep it as it is. And I would like the school to be more dynamic. I would like the volunteer organisations to be more dynamic. I fear that Crescent Head will become overwhelmed by holiday residences, as it is now. I believe already that there's been a changing proportion of people that are living there compared to holiday makers. Of course we need holiday makers, and we don't need, but we benefit from those. But I do think that this particular design is not sort of amenable to people living in. I think that the people that like to live in rural areas, they like to be able to put their feet on the ground and have a little garden. And certainly if you have kids, you need outdoor play space. So I'm not against development per se. As I said, even although I think that there would be could be more imaginative and better uses of that block of land, I wish I could have afforded to buy it, and I would have liked to have come up with alternate townhouse designs or something.
I'm
but
going to
anyway,
have to cut
I would just say
we're really conscious of time.
yeah,
We've
but
had
if
half
they
an
just
hour.
took off that top story, at least it would be like it still might be used for holiday people. But
To make comment,
Councillor, I only had one
one question.
question.
Yep.
Thank you. You'll have to leave anything else you've said to the debate. Is
Okay, thank you.
that okay? Unless it's
Yeah,
a
no, that's-
question. Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
finished. Thank you.
Kurt Crisp, are you here? Thank you. Kurt will be speaking on item 13.2 and outlining the development. Thank you.
Hi, I was hoping for some slides as well. Oh, thanks. Yeah. So can we go to the top of that? Okay, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I've come with the purpose of doing three things. The first is to show you what the current approval is, just in case there was any misinterpretation of what's actually on the site and what's available at the moment. The second was to try and address the major discussion points that have sort of come up in the last year and a half of approval, just with a few slides. And the third was to open myself up from questions. So this is over 10 years old, and this is a render from the original DA that's currently approved, and major works have started on this, so that means there's no timeframes for if they wanted to continue works. It's currently underway technically. So this could start again tomorrow. I was engaged by the client to review this, see if we can make it better. They felt like if they had to go down this path of building this, they weren't doing it as much justice. So they got us in the room to review what is a better urban planning result than this design. So it addressed the height issue by building a sub-basement, and they also they had a larger sub-basement than what we've got now, and it's the whole site. And you can see in the front there it's raised. So these are the general things we're trying to overcome with this design. So it's a raised platform, but it's got basement below, so there's no room for deep soil planting. It's all low shrubs and things like that. The windows facing Killook and Baker Drive, you can see in those images, are generally amenities or lifts or bathrooms and laundries, with all the front facing to the north, which is how you like to design units, but it's actually not a very good result for the neighbouring properties. And if we can just go to the next slide. So this is what we've come up with since then. So it's definitely a corner allotment to the south, and pushing away from those neighbours to the northeast and northwest. It is compliant with current heights as far as the SEP, as far as healthy living within an apartment. So the floor to ceiling heights are to the new rules, which the old one didn't have to comply with. It was pre those rules. And we've brought the basement out of the ground floor to avoid any of these flooding issues, and to we'll just make it a much more simpler build, to be honest. So the street setback, you were on site last month and had a look. There is a 2.2 metre to the closest edge, and there's a lot of sort of architectural fenestration on the front of this building to try and soften it and decrease that bulk and for aesthetic reasons. But you've seen now the width of the street, Baker, also the width of Killook, and the fact that there won't be buildings opposite it. So the street back was pushed hard for the purpose of opening up the back, but we feel it's justified in this location because of the actual streetscape and how it exists now. Next slide, please. So these three are just shadow diagrams. Quite simply, it's on the southern corner of the block, which makes it the simplest for overshadowing. So that's morning, and then we've got midday and afternoon. So they're generally over the street and the public areas each side, but that's the easiest to design to as far as an architect's concerned. So the next one, please. This is just a diagram sort of explaining how in the previous design all the living rooms were to the north, which gets you best light, but as an urban response it doesn't allow for passive surveillance of these areas. Now I've become aware that Kaluk and the ovals there do have a bit of a unsavoury sort of nightlife occasionally. Apparently the kids like to hang out there and there's a bit of trouble there, and that's just the quiet end of town that you can hide in the shadows. So these kind of solutions are to bring the public in to survey this. People will generally look after things more if they're seen by public areas, or privately owned areas, or if they know that they can be overlooked. Even if they aren't, if they feel they can, they'll start to behave better. So so we've deliberately moved living spaces to these outside corners. Next one, thanks. Privacy. So by pulling into the corner, we've opened up the northern corner, which is to the boundary. So you can see we've got the shortest wall against this boundary that we could get. We've also orientated the rooms to try and face Baker Drive and the backyard. So that's why you've got the blank wall on this side. And then we've proposed, and we had a landscape architect pick the species and things to grow trees up that will be high enough to shield that overlooking to the northeastern neighbour. Next one, thanks. This is the car park entry. We've moved it as far away from the intersection as we can. Oh, thanks.
All in favour? Thank you. You can continue.
Yes, this is as far away from the intersection as you can because that's where you have trouble with traffic. And the next slide shows the layout of the basement. There are 4 visitor parks on the left, which are open at all times, so there's no restriction on gates or getting passes or intercoms or things like that. And then on the right's all the secure parking and some storage, but it's compliant with the DCP controls as far as how many cars per unit. So we expect overflow will be at a minimum, if not negated by compliance with that. And this is the planting at the back. So what we get from removing the basement under the whole thing is that it's all deep soil green now. So we can plant out heavily. We can make that place private for future overlooking by any other developments and that sort of thing. And we've also got a great big pine tree. So there's a lot of opportunities that come with the landscaping that go there, and we've designated a little private open space area and that sort of thing. It's much more usable, and since it's not on the street as per the previous DA, we hope that people will be more willing to spend time in it. So this is the resulting aesthetic, obviously our favourite part. It's got quite a few material changes, although very subtle. We didn't want to be too contrasty as far as how the materials go together. So there's tiles, there's screens that hopefully we can grow plants up. We've got advice on that. The whole ground floor, we're proposing a brick screen so that there's transparency to it. It feels like a sort of an anti-podium to a 3-storey development. So there's all these architectural tricks that are difficult and obviously beyond what is required to get the building built, but that we feel were important to make it a successful build. Let's include Crescent and the rear view. So you can see the living rooms are all facing over the north, but they're set back from these 2 boundaries as far as we could manage. And yeah, that's the final slide. But basically, I was commissioned to build a better one of these, and there is the plan B is to go back to this, but hopefully I've shown where this has its shortcomings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Questions? I have a question from Councillor Baxter and Horval. I'll take Councillor Horval first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Kurt. Being an architect, you get to do lots of interesting things like coming up with great plans and colouring and so forth. It's quite a challenge. What I can't see in this slide that's up there at the moment, you can see where the lift is, and it's got a lift overrun, which is the extra height. there doesn't seem to be any lift overrun in the plan that we've seen.
Yeah, so we did research on the lifts before we did it, and they've now got a they don't need the overrun anymore. You can get a side mechanism which is within the shaft. So obviously this is a bit older, so you did have lift overruns then, but we've got enough space to do it in the zone we've got now. So it's actually, if you want to go up 2 slides, 3, sorry. It's on the screen there. That's an open public sort of walkway between the curved part, which is the back of the lift. We've disguised it by putting that curve in, and then to walk to the left units, you walk through an open area there. So there's transparency through the building, and that's trying to break up the bulk. And it's an outdoor space, so hopefully it gets cross ventilation. You don't need to air condition it and that sort of thing. It's a bit cheaper, but it's also a bit nicer, we feel, for the residents, that you're going outside before you get to your house. But yeah, that's the lift position on the right.
My other question is to do with the flood policy. I presume you've taken that into account when you've been designing this, is that correct?
Yep.
So I look at the plans and you've got car parks underneath. You've got 18 car parks, and quick question though, are they the correct width for cars? Because it looks from the plan that no one's ever going to get in and out of their car because they can't open their doors.
Yeah. They're to Australian standards, yeah. There's a template that's not quite showing on there, but there's door swings for front and back doors and how much space they need around them, and the columns are positioned to squeeze outside of that. But yeah, it's standard practice to be on.
Right, and in the bottom corner there's a caretaker room with a door opening onto a car that's right next to it.
Oh, there's a 1.5 metre gap there.
And the electrical switch room. Under the flood policy, can that switch room be on the bottom floor?
I would have to look it up. I think it can.
I've been told from an expert on development that you cannot build a switch room below the flood level.
Okay. I've never come across it in my career as being an issue within the floodplain, but if we had to address that, I would have to find space on that public
area. Would it be
area.
able to be moved to a different floor?
Yeah, it'd have to be moved to a different floor if that was the case, yeah. We wouldn't raise it on the ground floor because you've got a ceiling above you, and I wouldn't want to build a switch room outside of the envelope because it would ruin that landscaping. So, yeah, we'd find a place on the upper floor to do it.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you.
Just before you start, I just need to go back. I just need to go back to my original remarks. The questions must be on the agenda item only. They must be direct, succinct and without argument and debate. And answers given to the questions are not open to argument and debate. So if we could just all keep that in mind. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the first slide there, Kurt, looking at the far right-hand corner there, am I right to assume that this first DA, the building is closer to the boundary lines, the northern and western boundary lines?
It's I think it's the same setback we have, which is 5 metres. However, it's the full length, so there's 3 units facing the northeast and 3 facing the northwest, with a single one being a single aspect, so every bedroom and living room have to face that way. So it's got rooms the whole length of both boundaries overlooking,
Right.
and with no requirement for any privacy
Trees,
trees or anything.
No chance of trees because of the underground car park. What about that western side? Is that throwing shadow? Would that be throwing shadow onto the townhouses there?
Actually, shadows, because of this position on the block itself, weren't an issue for this place for the original DA either.
Okay.
So shadows were a moot point.
But a second question, so did you receive, were you responding when you redrew the plans? Were you, was that in response to complaints from the neighbours around it?
I had a lot of communication and dialogue with the planners here at Kempsey Council, and we took on board the neighbours' original objections to the original design. The original brief was to recreate this with as little fuss as possible, because we knew it would be controversial to resubmit it. So we attempted to do it in the same footprint, but there are too many urban planning issues that resulted in that, which is you're hard against the boundary, and there's no private space for these people to use themselves outside. You can see in that image that you're hardly going to walk your dog in there, or look after or take ownership of it. So it was a costly and time costly process. We'd completed that other design, and we elected to do the whole thing again. So start from scratch, which I've never had the opportunity to do before, which is great. You always do it better the second time around. So.
Can I ask you just quickly, Kurt? So if just to be devil's advocate, if I said, well, let's just turn that around, that original plan, and we still have the underground car park, you're saying the drawback for that is that you can't have any screening trees.
Yeah, the underground car park, you can't grow anything more than about 1.5 metre shrub on it, which is shown there quite generously, but it would all be low planting for all over the car park.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, further on that, the current controls for floor to ceiling heights, I sort of mentioned that a little bit. They've all increased these days too, so we couldn't actually comply with those conditions and keep that building for a resubmission. But as it's currently approved, we don't have to comply with the current rules.
Oh, really?
So that's why they can build it as it is, as a...
So what's the new floor to ceiling?
SEP 65 is 2.7 metres for living rooms, and that's based on a healthy living aspect, the occupants having enough space to not feel so confined. There's a lift of good design guides.
And what's this?
2.4.
2.4.
So that's the old standard. So there's a metre just in that.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt.
Councillor Patterson, then Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got 4 questions I'd like to ask Kurt. Kurt, the disability access in the current DA building, which is on the screen at the moment, would that meet current standards?
I'm pretty sure it does. There was a series of ramps to get you to the front. The glass multi-storey part was the entry foyer there. So from where those people are standing, there was ramps to get all the way up there. And those rules haven't changed much in the last 10 years, so I assume they're AS compliant.
Is it ideal access compared to the proposed DA for disability access?
Well, they're very similar. They would have to have the applicable handrails and things, and we do have to comply with the new BCA. The floor to ceiling heights aren't a BCA rule, so if that were to be built, it would be similar. And everyone would be using the same ramp entry, so there wouldn't be any.
Just on the parking bays, how many parking bays in this compared to the?
So there was the same amount, except this design, and we've gone over it with the client a few times. They opted to include big storage areas underneath. I think it was for resale. We're not quite sure why the previous architects did it. But that's what we've given up to make the space, and we position the road a bit more efficiently.
So in actual fact, it would be the same amount of traffic?
Yes. It's the same number of units, same traffic. The brief for us was to keep the same yield for everything. They didn't want more.
2 more to go. The current DA, is it within overshadowing design rules?
Yeah, it's the shadowing on the current and the proposed.
The current DA? And what about the proposed DA?
They both are. Yeah.
They both are.
And it's just fortunate the position on the block. If it was on one of the other corners, we'd have a lot more trouble trying to get the 3 hours of sunlight.
And just lastly, myself, I like the design of the new proposal, but is the design of the new proposal, is it of current design types that are built in coastal areas of unit blocks? Is it of the type, or is it something that's way out, never been done before?
No, it's of the type. We use a lot of precedent imagery to show our client at early stages of design, and so we've shown them examples of New South Wales architecture that's built similarly. There's kind of a move away from a sort of 90s look that's happening at the moment, so it's not down that path. It's more contemporary, but it's still concrete tiles and. Yeah, there's no techniques that are modern particularly.
Thank you, mate. Thanks, Kurt.
Councillor Shield.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Kurt, for your presentation this morning. Just a few quick questions. So regarding the floor, the SEP 65, you was talking about the 2.7 metres for ceiling heights. So I noticed that floor to floor it said 3.3, so that will give you a clear 2.7, will it, from floor to ceiling?
Yes, that allows for 600 mils between ceiling and the floor above.
Yep.
But we do have slab, we do have beams, and we do have to get mechanical and exhaust in there. So there are a few assumptions that have been made. There's no structural engineering at this stage, but that's our previous experience of what's required to be able to get those all those tolerances
so it's
in.
not looking like there's any ability for you to reduce the floor to floor heights as such to reduce the overall
There could be
scale.
out in the wash, but it would be 6 months of all consultants involved. You would need the mechanical, the electrical, and the structural engineering to all pull together and very detailed design. So we have to just make allowances at the DA stage.
Okay. And also, just to clarify, there seemed to be some misinterpretation. So the 13.4 metres is from natural ground level to the top of the building. So
That's
that
the very
includes
highest point. Yep.
Yep. And
The slab, I think, is 100 mil above natural ground level is what we tried to do, just so there's a little bit of tolerance for any water overland flow sort of things.
This is not a 600 mil slab in there?
No, the slab will be set in. That's the standard practice. And piers and footings are usually under the point loads of the columns, not the entire slab. There's a lot of cost in concrete, so builders will try to do as little as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the setback, so that's actually from the title boundary, it's not from the curb of the road, is it?
That's correct. That's actually a good image to show you the setback to the boundary from the curb, and you were on site, so you've seen it yourselves. But the perceived setback we feel on the street is a lot less than the documented setback.
Yep. Just wanted to clarify that there were a few people that had commented thinking the setback was from the curb.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McGee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions. Firstly, the previous speaker asked about death by incremental change, and it's a fair comment. What do you say about, as you progress with the actual design, the engineering details of the plan, is it possible to guarantee that the height won't increase beyond the designed height?
I'm not sure from a council perspective whether it can be written in as a condition that the height has to remain at that. By all means, someone could apply for it to increase, but they would need some kind of construction motivation to do it, because it would just be a fight that you don't want to have.
So your intention then is that it would not?
No, I think we have.
I'm seeking some assurance for the community that it's not going to continue
the tolerances
to
we have,
increase.
I definitely think that we can build it at that height, and that's why we haven't asked for a centimetre more or a centimetre less. There would be no advantage to the seller that doesn't make a better product for them, so there's no motivation that way. I can't imagine a circumstance where we would need more height for any reason. Okay. That's why we were doing lift reviews. We go in with the intention that we could not get an extension of height if we wanted to.
Yes, that would be your understanding.
So we have to make our client confident that this is adequate. So
I have another question, if I may. There was another question that was raised by the previous speaker about school children's safety and the questioning of the movements around that. Can you explain how, if there is any change, in fact, between the current DA that's approved and the new DA with regards to child safety? Is there any change from DA to DA? And also, what is being done in the design that's currently proposed that ensures the safety of children and children's movement in the area?
Yes, it's a heavy sort of traffic question that we take into consideration to a degree. But as you can see in this one, there's immediately a ramp that goes down because the basement is subfloor, which would inhibit your view quite a bit when you're coming out of that garage. The proposed one's on grade, and you're back quite a far way before you get to your boundary. I'm assuming it's about 2 car lengths before you actually even reach the boundary, so there's time to assess that situation. And we don't have any landscaping proposed around that entry point, which would inhibit your views and that sort of thing. But apart from adequately being able to see out your car and see the kids coming, or entering into the site, I think is a safe point. That's just like any driveway. And as we said before, it's 15 units as per before in the same amount of car spaces, so there shouldn't be any increase to what was approved before.
I just have one more question, if I may. Also, there was a question raised as to whether this block would possibly become additional holiday accommodation as opposed to residential. What assurances are put in your understanding, in the application that makes sure that this property does become residential and doesn't default to holiday accommodation in the future?
I've talked a lot about it, particularly with this client, because it's been an ongoing design, but they feel that they will actually get better sales from residential people, and if you're selling and half is sold, it's always a better building and better looked after if it's residential living there. So they started to ask us how to encourage it. So we've built better units. They're all cross ventilated. They all have external windows. They all have these views that are private. So we're trying to encourage a better sort of demographic of people living there, morally as well as financially. We're motivated by both sides. The client and I had a conversation about 6 months ago. They were looking into trying to put their own legislation on it. They wanted to somehow tie it in. I can't remember the particulars of. They had a certain form that they wanted to be able to say you're not allowed to do it, and they were looking into it for this instance if it was going to help with the approval, but also within themselves they thought it wasn't going to devalue it at all anyway. So they were trying to make it more of a community as a building.
Councillor Baxter, then Councillor Shields.
Thank you, Kurt. Kurt, I want to ask you a hard question. I don't want to offend you. A friend at Crescent Head said that you designed that original one?
No.
Oh, you didn't design it?
I was at university when that was designed.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, the argument is that this original design, this original DA with the underground car park, that the seepage into the car park, the flooding, the ability of the engineers or the architects to keep subterranean water out is prohibitive, and that it really, well, it can't be done. But you said at the start of your presentation, if this new DA isn't passed, they'll default back to this, and that this will be built. So is it possible to do?
The easiest and cheapest solution, which is what they would have to go down that route, is for multiple pump out spots. So you have to drop your concrete at a certain location and pump that water, so encourage the water to go to there. I think there was 3 locations designed into this one, and that's all fine when it's working well, but there's a capacity that they can pump at, and normally a storm doesn't listen to capacities. But you also have to do the ongoing maintenance of it, and that's what developers are more scared of. If they don't do 6 monthly reviews and send someone around to check the mechanics of the pumps are working correctly, because they're automatic switch-ons, they only switch on in the event that they get filled up. And if they don't do the adequate, if strata misses some and something happens and there's an incident and it starts to ruin cars, then they're liable for it. So there's just a whole bunch of flow-on effects that they'd rather not. But it's easy to implement, hard to maintain solution. So they would avoid it if they could, but if they had to, pumps don't cost that much, so they can get them in and sell and try and run.
Okay, thank you
for that solution.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Shields.
One last question. The previous speaker, Kurt, had said, why don't you just take the top floor off and then it will meet the height restrictions. I know you can't speak for the developer, but do you think, what are your comments on that, and do you think that it's still a viable development without the top story?
Unfortunately, no. I know, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I can assume that they would say, not a chance, we're going to do the LDA. It's just yield on the site, and 10 apartments versus 15 would be more than any profit they were trying to get back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Our third public forum speaker this morning is Dr. Nona Harvey, and she'll be supported by Mandy Hustler, and they'll be speaking on item 15.1, which is the notice of motion, and they'll be speaking for. Thank you.
Dear Mayor, Madam Mayor and councillors, thank you for this opportunity speak to Council about our concerns regarding climate change and to endorse notice of motion item 15.1. Mandy and I speak on behalf of Macleay Living Sustainably Group, which has been privileged to work with Councillor Morris on the framing of the climate change policy and action plan before you. We feel we need to speak today to try and communicate to you something of the urgency, if not the emergency, we all face as a result of the acceleration of climate change. An acceleration which even the collective research of scientists has underestimated. In my view, one reason for this is to do with the conventions of scientific discourse, which scientists and academics in general are required to conform to as part of the discipline. I base this view on my expertise as a teacher of scientific English at University of New South Wales for 20 years before I came to Kempsey 15 years ago. For example, the language of uncertainty is embedded in scientific discourse, especially when making predictions. By the same token, conclusions are required to be cautious and conservative. The consensus of scientific evidence has been building over the past few decades, and it is now irrefutable that accelerated or enhanced climate change is caused by an increase in human-induced greenhouse gases. See New South Wales Government Climate Change Policy website for that definition of enhanced climate change, they call it. I prefer to call it accelerated, but anyway, that's me. This is now accepted across the board by the experts, by the different levels of government, corporations and the community at large. Unfortunately, we now find ourselves in a dire situation where the polar ice caps are melting at a faster rate than previously predicted. The warming of the Arctic, for example, has led to a dramatic loss of ice, which has been decreasing during an average September month at a rate of 13.2% per decade since 1980, see NASA 2018. That is over 2/3 of the ice cover, which has led to a compounding of climate change due to the reduced reflectivity from the reduced ice surface area, thus increasing the risk of even greater sea level rises in the future. This recent finding has led to a global consensus of nations that global warming must be reduced by the next 7 to 12 years. The latest IPCC report, August 2018, warns that we need to limit global temperature to rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade or less to avoid catastrophic consequences. Unfortunately, we are currently on a trajectory of 3.4 degrees rise this century. Thank you.
We no longer need scientists to warn us of the impacts of climate change. We have been experiencing them for ourselves, particularly over the past couple of years, where even locally the temperatures and lengths of heat waves have been at record highs. As a fourth generation Macleay local, I suggest to you that we have a serious problem here. These extreme weather events have become part of the new, out of the ordinary trend, rather than an isolated event in a seasonal cycle. I invite you to think of this proposed climate change policy like you would an insurance policy or a fire safety plan, a policy that is a precautionary measure to lay down a plan for the safety and prosperity of our community. At the same time, actively create a more livable and vibrant community, one where we are taking steps as a council and community to reduce our global footprint and mitigate more intense and frequent heat waves, longer fire seasons, longer droughts leading to difficult and unpredictable farming conditions. Taking out an insurance policy, making a plan to prevent the likelihood or even the possibility of these events increasing surely is only common sense.
Just a moment. Do I have a second? Extension? It's carried.
The cost of business, as usual, is immense. For example, it is predicted that in a few decades, 1 in 10 houses will be uninsurable, the ratio varying from region to region. That's from Actuaries Institute 2019. As yet, we haven't had citizens' houses under threat from storm surges like some of our neighbouring shires have. As yet, we haven't seen Category 5 cyclone damage or unprecedented rain dumps killing thousands of cattle and near bankrupting farmers as they have in Queensland. Do we want to see an increase in the frequency and intensity of the Macleay River floods? We must start to take today to put our community safety net in place with the proposed climate change policy. Once Council takes that step, it will be better positioned to access grants, boost cooperation across government agencies, and protect the interests of our community. Government at all levels is already committing to doing more to embrace renewables, to ensure an orderly transition to a low-carbon economy. Indeed, all local governments in the Mid-North Coast, except Kempsey Shire Council, have already adopted climate change policies, thus positioning themselves to take advantage of funds flowing from state and federal coffers to achieve these goals. We urge you as our leaders to start taking serious action on climate change and ensure this motion for a climate change policy and action plan is not only passed, but also implemented as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. There is no questions. Thank you. Item number 9. Consideration of motions for supplementary reports and motions for change of order of business. Thank you, Councillor. It's seconded by Councillor Shields. All in favour? It's been carried. Consideration of reports relating to public forum matters.
Madam Mayor, I move that we bring forward 15.1 and 13.2. I ask that we consider 15.1 prior to 13.2, as I have got another commitment and I need to leave as soon as I can.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shields. All in favour? That's carried. So we'll go straight into item 15.1. I'll just wait a moment for councillors to find their 15.1 on their iPads, because I believe we've got a little bit of problem with the with stocks on tap. Yes, I realise that.
I reckon the change is better than what it was.
It's
still not good, but it's still better.
It's page 45. Councillor Morris.
Madam Mayor, I'm very pleased
Just before you speak, you're moving the recommendation. Do I have a seconder for the... Thank you, Councillor Horval.
Madam Mayor, I'm very pleased to move the motion as included in the Council agenda to progress a climate change for Council and for our community. That reading, that Council staff review the attached preliminary draft climate change policy, that after being reviewed, a draft climate change policy be reported to Council to consider placing the policy on public exhibition, that Council includes the development of a long-term energy strategy and renewable energy and emissions reduction plan in the 2019-20 operating plan. Council develops an action plan to guide the development of supporting strategies and plans, the implementation and reporting of actions undertaken as outlined in any new and existing Council strategies and plans that relate to the policy, and the engagement and participation of the community. And that Council develops terms of reference for endorsement by Council to establish a sustainability committee to assist with the implementation of the policy and progression of the action plan. Initially, I would like to acknowledge and thank the subcommittee from Macleay Living Sustainably for their support and input, and to thank Nona and Mandy for the very informative presentation they made during the public forum session a couple of minutes ago. Whilst this is my third attempt at progressing this matter, the advanced distribution of this report to my fellow councillors on Friday the 8th of March, the issue of climate change has been put on the council radar with some interesting debate and comment by email. I consider this matter as being strategically important for council. Ideally, council should have already adopted such a policy, but it is never too late to catch up. The consideration of this matter is quite timely. It comes after an international student strike last Friday in relation to climate change. Much political debate discerning climate change in lead up to the state and federal elections. Heightened concerns that global action is inadequate and calls for a climate emergency, which I'm sure all my fellow councillors received by email yesterday. A shift in scientific opinion as climate change data suggests that globally we're at the extreme end of all climate change forecasts, and the real concern that we may be at a critical tipping point in relation to climate change, particularly with methane being released from the bottom of the oceans as the ocean temperature increases. How much more will it take for that tipping point to be reached? It is important that we at least acknowledge the impacts of climate change and take action to mitigate and adapt regardless of the cause of these changes. Whilst many believe the science and accept that human activity has enhanced or accelerated climate change, as Mandy and Nona stated in the presentation, even if you do not agree with this claim, the evidence of climate change is clear. More severe events, more often across the world. Mozambique, they're suspecting 1,000 deaths from a cyclone yesterday. We've had extreme cold weather events in the United States. We've had extreme drought and then followed by extreme floods in North Queensland. We're experiencing drier than the driest ever January and February in the Macleay Valley.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, I'd like to question that. He's making statements that I don't.
Well, you'll have your chance for debate.
The evidence is there. If you look at the meteorological information, the driest ever recorded January and February occurred in the Macleay this year. Whilst many believe the evidence of climate change is clear. The underlying cause we as a community need to take action to manage and eliminate any increase in greenhouse gases to mitigate any further changes and work to adapt to these changes that cannot be mitigated. On current projections of sea level rise, Hat Head is in serious jeopardy by the end of this century. What should we do about this? A climate change policy provides the context or framework for a series of strategies and associated action plans in climate change and sustainability initiatives. Council currently has several plans and reports that are applicable to this space. The following list may not be complete, and several other strategies and plans should be considered. We currently have a climate change risk assessment, Kempsey Shire Council, climate change adaptation strategy for Nambucca, Ballingen and Kempsey, which is attached to this report, Kempsey Shire ecologically sustainable development strategy, a Kempsey coastal zone management plan, a regional waste minimisation strategy, and a biodiversity strategy which is under development. The two main comments by email concerning this matter have ranged from changing the name of this policy to a sustainable living policy to that of replacing the policy with a higher level strategy such as an environmental sustainability strategy, on the basis that this approach would better serve the community rather than a deep dive into climate change. In relation to changing the name to that of a sustainability living policy, the notion of having to adapt or mitigate the impacts of climate change would not be consistent with a policy so titled. Although I do believe that a sustainability living strategy should be considered as a supporting strategy to a climate change policy. Equally, I agree that an environmental sustainability strategy is needed. I likewise see such a strategy fitting under the framework of a climate change policy.
Thank you, Councillor. You
paragraph
need
G
to wind up your comments.
of the principal paragraph G. Council acknowledges that local government has a key role to play in climate change mitigation and the management of climate change impacts, particularly through its statutory responsibilities and regulatory powers relating to land use planning, environmental protection and natural resource management. Council also has a vital role to play in supporting community climate action through leading by example, education and encouraging behavioural change.
Councillor McGinn.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment, if I may, please.
And the amendment?
I have handed it to Donna, so she should be able to get it on the screen. It's a two-part amendment. Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
It's called an environmental sustainability policy. The first part is that Council requests the General Manager to bring back a report on the processes and resources required to develop an environmental sustainability policy, encompassing related strategies and policies and action plans, along with comments and information about forming a sustainability committee. And part 2, that a council workshop be conducted to inform the development of the environmental sustainability policy.
Do I have a seconder?
Second that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor
Can I
Patterson. Yes,
speak to
just a moment. We need to have the seconder. We've got a seconder, Councillor Patterson. Yes.
Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that Council does need to give due consideration to the complex matters of climate change, and so I don't refute anything that's been said by the previous speaker, and much of the information that Bruce has said I also agree with. But I'm of a view that we can't adopt a climate change policy in isolation of a larger environmental sustainability policy, which I believe sits above the climate change policy. That might be where Councillor Morris and I disagree. I believe that an environmental sustainability policy is a higher level policy than a climate change alone policy, and would encompass a number of elements, including, therefore, the climate change policy and, for example, waste reduction, recycling, renewable energy, emissions reduction plans, and so on, to sit beneath the overarching environmental sustainability policy, which I believe is what we require as a council as a starting point. I believe that we as a council, that is the councillors, need to have a workshop and discuss these matters, because that's going to help us inform the position that council has and bring along the councillors to be involved in developing that policy. At this stage, we've not had a conversation of councillors to be able to do that. So it's likely that it's going to be a more divisive position to getting towards this environmental sustainability policy. So I believe the workshop of councillors before we adopt any prescriptive policies is absolutely essential to ownership. I believe to adopt the climate change policy in isolation that has been presented is putting the cart before the horse, and to do so may create unintended consequences, which is why I'm suggesting we need the higher level policy to begin with, and then sit these other policies underneath. And as I said, we need to develop these policies, but we do need to do it collaboratively as a group of councillors and with staff, and we need to bring our councillors along the journey to that sustainable future. And that's why I'm putting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Horval and Councillor Morris, you close debate. Yes, Councillor Horval.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak in opposition to the amendment. I'm actually would like people to know that there's a Flat Earth Society out there. You can actually find it at flatearth.org, and it'll tell you that the Earth is still flat. I'm now going to tell you
We're not discussing that.
That climate change is a real thing happening in the world.
I'll take your point of order. Just stick to the conversation. Thank you.
I am.
Councillor.
I'm developing my argument against the amendment, Madam Mayor, which seeks out to exclude the words climate change from the heading of what we're doing. No. And I would like you to tell you all that climate change is something that is beyond debate. The Earth is round. Climate change is real. If you wish to go off with the flat earthers or the deniers, then you have not read enough. Now, all of us sitting around here at this table making this decision are not scientists, so we have to go to the experts. Who are some of the experts? National Party of Australia says there's climate change. It's in their policy. The Coalition commits to clean energy apartments. That's a news item from yesterday. And they believe in climate change and they need to do it. And of course...
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I'm not questioning climate change. Indeed, I agree with the concept.
I understand that, but give the Councillor a chance.
Madam Mayor, that's not a point of order. And she's...
Didn't accept the point of
Thank
order,
you, Madam
Councillor.
Mayor.
Continue.
Thank you very much. I want us to accept the idea that climate change is real because the experts tell us, not because we have a belief that the world is flat or the belief that there is no climate change. The state government's environment and heritage say that the greenhouse effect, and it's caused by humans. The climate change policy or framework from the environment and heritage says the New South Wales government has released a New South Wales climate change policy framework which commits New South Wales to the aspirational objectives of achieving net zero emissions by 2050 and helping New South Wales to become a more resilient to changing climate. They aren't denying it. Our own government experts are saying climate change is real. There's no government department saying that the world is flat, and there's no government department saying there's no climate change. The experts say that. We shouldn't be running away from it. We then have the effect on the economy of the climate change. The Reserve Bank of Australia has taken a climate change and saying that climate change is affecting our economy. We should not be running away from climate change. We should be joining our neighbouring councils that say climate change is real. They have a climate change policy. The policy put up by Councillor Miles addresses that and gives the power to our executive of council to make sure that our policy fits in with whatever is needed for the Kempsey Shire. A person who you would think that would be a denier of climate change, an ex-coal boss, his name is Ian Dunlop, writes, UNJ's climate change is happening faster than officially acknowledged. Extreme events intensifying, particularly in Australia, Asia and the Pacific. Victoria and Tasmania are ablaze again. Queensland needs a decade to recover from recent floods. Much of the southeast Australia has become a frying pan, curtailing human activity. These are experts in lots of areas, including the coal mining area, saying that we have climate change, we have to address it, and council should be supporting the original motion and not going along with the idea of sustainable environment, which flows from a climate change policy. It's not the other way around.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any other questions? Thank you, Councillor. Nobody? I'll put the... Yes, Councillor.
Madam Mayor.
And then Councillor Shields, have you got something to say?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking for the amendment, I do agree wholeheartedly that our world, our economy, our environment needs us, and we need them. We need it. Sustainability, environmentally and economically, we cannot have an environment without having people. I wholeheartedly support Councillor McGinn's amendment, because this is not setting policy on the run, once again, which we seem to be trying, certain councillors are sending us that way. We need to wholeheartedly look at this policy. We need to work out what's best for our residents of the Macleay, those who work, those who just here are retired, those people who come here to holiday. We need to work out what's best for everyone. I myself find it very interesting that as soon as you mention anything about the possibility of looking at climate change in a different aspect and a different view, I myself find it very interesting that people start pointing fingers and saying you're not allowed to have your own idea, your own say on the whole climate change policy. I myself believe that the world is very old, 4.5 billion years old. I myself know for a fact, like Councillor Horville said, fact is a fact that our country is 0.33% of the world's population. I know, like the fact Councillor Horville says again, we produce 1.3% of the world's emissions, so-called climate change emissions, and I believe, like Councillor Horville said, a fact that if we all stopped doing everything tomorrow and all fell over and everyone in this country of Australia ceased, I believe...
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
You're stating what you believe?
I never said any of those three last facts.
I'm not going to
He's
accept
taking me
it.
out of context. I never said any of it.
Councillor, continue.
I'm just stating stated facts that we have no effect on the world's climate. We in Australia, if we stop tomorrow, because we have so many countries in our earth, I won't name them all because there's so many, the highest populated countries in our world do not adhere to proper sustainability policies, which I believe they should. So we need to make sure that what we decide on in council will not set a precedence that we put everything, climate change above all sustainability. We need to be sustainably, financially and economically and environmentally. So I do support Councillor McGinn.
Do I have any other speakers?
I was speaking for the amendment though.
Okay, we've had a speaker for and against.
I'll close the debate, so
You'll let it go.
Councillor Shields should speak.
Councillor
Thank you,
Shields.
Councillor Morris. I'll be brief. Those that are for the amendment are not against a climate change policy. I feel that the amendment is actually just engaging all the councillors rather than us just adopting or looking at another climate change policy. And I applaud Councillor Morris for the work that he's done with this. The other thing is I object to point 3 of Councillor Morris, that we include it in the operating plan. You'll hear me say this time and time again. Let's not make the operating plan now. Let's actually consider everything holistically, which we are looking at that next month. So let's actually include climate change or an environmental sustainability policy, whatever you want to call it. Let's consider that then. And climate change has been happening for a long time. If it was such an emergency, why were we not talking about it at the last operating plan when we developed it? Why were we not talking about it when we developed the delivery program as such? So I'm saying it is an issue, we acknowledge that, but we can't send council staff mid-operating plan sending resources to a new issue. And let's consider it in the next operating plan, and I'm sure it will make its way in there.
Thank you, Councillor.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question of the General Manager, please?
You may.
Madam Mayor, assertion that this adoption of the climate change policy will cost on staff time and resources to adopt it. What would your view be on the cost of implementing it today?
There is a definite resource implication of adopting what is in the notice of motion. As I think the General Manager's comment to the notice of motion clearly indicates, we do have to reprioritise the staff's resources to do this. When you place anything on public exhibition, there's a communications plan that needs to go with that. There's actually engaging with the public as comments come in. There's actually collating and summarising and analysing the submissions and those things as well. So there is a commitment from a staff resources point of view to do that. And yeah, so the General Manager's comments really cover off on there's internally strong support for the development of policies and the need to develop policies around climate change and sustainability and emissions reductions and a whole range of different things. We need to work out how we're going to resource that and how we're going to do that strategically. And one of our key concerns is that at the moment, as a group of councillors, you haven't had a good discussion about this yourselves, and I think you need to do that. And certainly what has happened today and over this last week or so is Councillor Morris has actually put this firmly on the agenda, which I think is a really positive thing for this council to actually see. And actually having that done, what we need to do is have you as a group of civic leaders get really engaged in this and put a very thoughtful way forward for our community, and also engaging groups such as the Climate Action Group, I think, what was it called? The Sustainable, yeah. And all the relevant expertise we've got in our community, we need to be able to actually engage with those as well.
Thank you, Chair. I speak for the amendment on the basis that Councillor Morris recommended this document, a climate change adaptation strategy for Nambucca, Bellingen and Kempsey. This document was produced in 2010. It has 21 recommendations for the Kempsey Shire And I think with a workshop and being able to digest this document and all the other recommendations, so I agree with what the General Manager just said. Can I make a second point? Could I have the Chair's indulgence to bring up a map up there, of Australia? It relates to the... Well, it does. It relates...
It relates to the amendment.
Yes,
I know you're a school teacher.
It relates to... No, it does, Madam Chair.
You're pushing it.
I seek your indulgence.
You've got 1 minute.
Thank you,
We're
Chair.
timing it.
I bring up this document to address what Councillor Patterson and Councillor Harvey are alluding to. There's a serious emotional thing about climate change. You bring up the word climate change, you've got a debate straight away. This interesting document shows you a 57-year trend showing a general drying on the east coast of Australia. Whether it's cyclical, as Councillor Patterson alludes to, whether it's due to human-induced emissions, so there is a serious problem. That's a 5 centimetre average reduction in rainfall in our valley. And if the trend continues, I agree, something has to be addressed. So, for that reason, I support the amendment, Councillor. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor, because we need to get back to what we're discussing here. So I will, before I get Councillor Morris to close debate.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, could I ask a question of Councillor McGinn, please? Would she be prepared to amend the idea of the workshop to include after environmental sustainability policy and climate change policy?
How about we make it even broader and say, and other, and the suite of other policies? I mean, the point is, in calling it an environmental sustainability policy, and the reason why I was pitching that is because the idea was that climate change, waste reduction, emissions, renewable energy, they're all important as well for us to consider together. So whilst I think the climate change stuff is really important, and it's now on the agenda for us to work with moving forward, I think we need to be holistic. And so I'm not a climate change denier when I say environmental sustainability. I'm talking about us being more holistic. Actually, talking through that, I think it's probably better that we don't single out an individual policy, because I'm trying to say that we need a holistic view to our suite of policies.
Yeah, may I suggest some wording? The council workshop be conducted to form the development of a suite of policies that cover issues such as climate change, sustainable living, emissions reduction, renewable energy, sea level rise, carbon footprint, etc.
Seconder, do you accept that?
Yes. That's straight off the James comment. That's part of the James comment.
Are you wanting to close debate? Is that what your light's on?
No, well,
I just want to say something.
I just want to make sure I don't get the that I miss the opportunity to close
no,
debate.
I will absolutely give you the opportunity to close debate. I just want to, while they're getting this absolutely right, I just want to make a couple of comments because, and let the community know where I sit on this, because I will be supporting the amendment. But before I do put your close of debate, I need to say to the community and to the people here, thank you to Councillor Morris for bringing this back to the table. This is the third time he's brought it back. He's done a lot of research, and I don't think anyone is sitting here saying we have to not consider climate change at all. And the fact that we haven't done it as quickly as what our neighbours have done, maybe is because we had other things on our minds, or maybe it was something that wasn't brought to our fore. But I do know that that policy, that that document that Councillor Baxter had from 2010, I was on council then, I went to the workshops, and I do understand that a large number of the recommendations we have, without the policy embedded, progressed and done. That was 10 years ago. It is absolutely opportune that we do it now. We can learn from our neighbours who've already enacted something and make it current for today, because we know that things like climate change, the science around it, what people are talking about and their commentary has changed in 10 years. So we need to bring it back into today's context. So before I let Councillor Morris close debate, I just do want to thank him, and I think we should acknowledge him for what he has done today. So thank you, Councillor Morris.
Just before you do close debate, can we add up the waste reduction and recycling, renewable energy? I mean, oh no, we've got renewable energy. It does say such as, so I'm not trying to burden the council with all these things. It's just that it captures.
What we've tried to cover there is that you need a suite of policy strategies and action plans.
And some of them we already have.
We want to make sure. Yes, correct.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. I know that your time precious at the moment and it's morning tea, so if you'd like to close debate, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'd just like to close debate by saying that the proposed climate change policy outlines the principles, objectives, provides some definitions and concludes with a statement of intent. It does not make any recommendations or suggestions on actions. The policy is not a deep dive into climate change, as some people have suggested, but a policy that sets the framework or context for strategies and plans addressing climate change to be developed. And on that basis, I would prefer to change the name to a climate change and sustainability policy. I'm afraid I can't support the recommendation, the amendment as it's typed, and I will be looking to move another amendment, unfortunately, which will prolong things, which I don't want to do. But all I can say is that the science is in, and I suggest you all read the New South Wales Government Office of Environmental and Heritage website, with particular reference to the causes of climate change. The forecast from the scientific arena is continually being updated, and the more recent data clearly indicating that we are at the extreme end of all forecasts. Evidence is strengthening that we must act now. I'd just like to make a quote that was made recently by one of our former politicians. We have the means to get to zero emissions or near zero emission in Australia, but you need to plan it. You've got to have engineering and economics rather than ideology and idiocy. And regrettably, there's quite a lot of that around. That's what Malcolm Turnbull said 3 or 4 days ago. In addition, in the Argus today, our state member has claimed that we are investing, meaning the state government, more than $1.4 billion to help households, businesses and communities save energy and reduce greenhouse emissions. And we have a plan to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 and to not make New South Wales more resilient to a changing climate. Clearly, we should be moving in the same direction as a council and a community and maximising our opportunities and having something on the table sooner the better. I don't know about you, but I would like to see us take action now, and I plead with you to move with and support the original motion. Let's leave a planet that can sustain and provide for our future generations. In addition, some of the other comments that were made, yes, Australia might have an insignificant contribution against the rest of the world, but we should be leading by example, and if the rest of the world takes the lead from our example, we will move nowhere. It's more about setting the correct example and moving forward. And the main reason why I put in the recommendation that we have a long-term energy strategy and renewable energy emissions reduction plan in the 1920 operating plan is because that's what's already been reported by the General Manager in Matters in Progress, and we have been told that that will be funded in that. So I suppose I'm just confirming what has already been stated as the intent of our staff. I see this policy as not being something that hones us in on any action, but it provides the framework and context for all of the policies that we need. And I agree, we need a waste reduction, we need recycling, we need renewable energy, we need sea level rise. All those things that are there, I see hanging off this very simplistic policy that every other council in our region has got, most other councils around Australia have got. It doesn't lock us into any actions. It highlights that we need to develop other strategies and plans to do whatever we can to best adapt and mitigate, and hopefully mitigate against climate change so we don't have to adapt our style of life too much. Having said that, I'd like to move a foreshadowed amendment, and that is that paragraph 1 be changed to be more open. I can't support it where we say we bring back a report on the process and resources required to develop an environmental sustainability policy. I could support it if it said that, similar to point 2, that a report on the process and resources required to develop an appropriate suite of policy and strategies in the climate change area be developed. And Councillor McGinn has said that that doesn't exclude climate change. I would like to think that when we have the debate, we're not focused purely on an environmental sustainability policy, but we are focused on the whole range of the policy arena and the strategies that come from it. But that's not what it says, so I cannot support that as it is. I could support it if the intent was expressed in words that everybody can read and understand that that is the intent.
Mr. General Manager.
I would prefer to see sustainability and climate change, because it should be more about the environmental sustainability.
Bruce, isn't that in point 2 already?
Can I ask the General Manager a question through you, Madam Mayor, if that's his understanding of the words that are up there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the words in point 1 are quite specific in environmental sustainability policy, encompassing a wide range of things. As staff, we would bring back to you, after having done point 2, we would actually do point 2 first. We'll actually bring back to you what we believe is a suite, and whether the headline policy is an environmental sustainability policy or a climate change policy, or there is, staff would recommend to you what they believe is the proper policy and the range of suite and priority or hierarchy of those things. We certainly don't have a position on that at the moment.
With the indulgence of the rest of Council, can we make point 2, point 1 and point 1, point 2? Does that help? Because the intention would be, my idea is that we do workshop council, or do they necessarily have to be in chronological order? Is that?
It would help if 2 was 1 and 1 was 2. As long as we, by having to develop
I actually think it's there. I think we're splitting hairs, you know.
No, but to develop an environmental sustainability policy is quite specific. That's saying that is the primary policy, and we are guiding the staff that is the primary policy. I believe we should be guiding the staff that we want a policy that is in the sustainability and the climate change arena.
I think we're splitting hairs. Can we put the motion?
No, I've moved you can put the motion, but I've moved a foreshadowed amendment,
Which we have.
which needs to be seconded if this motion gets
If this motion gets defeated, then we'll go to the foreshadowed. If this motion is accepted, then the foreshadowed motion doesn't come on.
Foreshadowed amendment does
the
come.
foreshadowed amendment. If this gets if the amendment gets put and is accepted,
Yeah, the foreshadowed
the
amendment
motion.
becomes an amendment.
It becomes an amendment to the motion.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, just a comment. I think we're getting bogged down on the name of the policy, which we should probably discuss it at the workshop instead. What about for point 2, we take out the policy name and just say to develop relevant policies that come from the workshop as such, because
Even that would be better.
yeah, let's
Because that we are saying
use the workshop to inform us of what direction we're heading in, possibly.
But we're the ones going to the...
Obviously, depending.
Yes, but it is words, but if it gets us to where we need to go, councillor, that would probably be something that is acceptable by all of us. Yes?
You could, again, Madam Mayor, point 2, the council requested General Manager bring back a report on the process and resources required to develop the relevant suite of policies, strategies and action plans
resulting from the workshop.
and that would include, from our point of view, also the consideration of whether council should or shouldn't have, or what it might look like for a sustainability committee as well.
What about, here's a suggestion, in number 1, when you say addressing the issues, because it says that a council workshop be conducted to inform the development of a suite of policies, strategies and action plans addressing issues such as, and we've got climate change, sustainable living, we can have, so that includes all of the different potential parts of the suite of policies. So number 2, just take out environmental sustainability policy and
you could actually
the suite of policies.
You could actually drop number 2 altogether and just add on to number 1, and then a subsequent report come back to council.
Yeah.
Happy with that?
Seconder? Happy with that? Okay. I put the amendment. All in favour of the amendment? All against the amendment? The amendment becomes the motion. It's been carried. I put the motion. All in favour of the motion? All against the motion?
The motion isn't as written up there, is it?
No, it's still being done. Do you want me to wait?
Yeah, so I can see exactly what it is.
I'm just conscious of time,
Yeah.
Councillor.
And I believe that we should also be adding, I also believe, in the interests of the discussion that we've had, that we need to add to that long list of things, issues such as climate change, sustainable living. Somewhere in there we should be putting down environmental sustainability, because that's what was mentioned in... Yeah, that was what was mentioned in the other one, so it should be included in that list. Environmental sustainability is different to sustainable living. Sustainability, sustainable living, emissions reduction. Yeah. I don't care what order they come in either, as long as they're all there as equal status.
Instead of a separate, such as but not limited to.
Okay, put such as and not limited to.
Yeah.
Instead of a separate.
Yeah.
And Madam Mayor, could I put after the last word council, put for determination? So that puts us back as a report for us to decide.
But I think we need it, because any report that comes back to council is considered by council on a regular
Well, it could be included in, as we've had with a couple of reports being put into updates on actions, which has happened before.
This won't.
Anyway, I think we've got to a point where we can. I'm going to put them.
Madam Mayor, can I just please make one comment before I go? The only disappointment I've got from this is 3 months ago, one of the primary reasons why we weren't going to progress with the climate change policy was because of the staff time and effort that would be involved in developing a policy. Now we've got a policy which I believe is suitable and ticks a lot of the things off. We're going to throw it back to the staff to redevelop something completely different and put this out possibly 6 to 12 months.
But they may not redevelop something completely different. They may accept what is there, which is probably what they will do. But it'll be much more expanded. We'll be able to go with all the rest of the...
A policy shouldn't be expanded.
Anyway, we're going to put a vote on this. All in favour? All against? It's been carried. Thank you, councillors. We're going to break for morning tea. Thank you. Councillors, please resume your seats.
15.2, so
We're at page 9, 13.2. Thank you, councillor. I have a mover and I have a seconder. Just before we go into any debate, if there is any, I am going to move a procedural motion that council staff make a presentation. This is for the councillors' benefit mostly, but also for the community, so that they have some understanding of the things that have been highlighted to us. So I'll take that to the General Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Do I have to put the procedural motion? All in favour of the procedural motion, all against? That's been carried. Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask Shane Ridenhold and Graham Snow to come forward and make this presentation.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Does that work now? Yes. So we'd like to focus on the variations and the decision-making process. But we'd like to start with, we've recently got some, in the last month or so, council has acquired some 3D modelling of Crescent Head and Southwest Rocks. At Southwest Rocks it's just the CBD, but at Crescent Head it's the whole township pretty much. We have had the consultants who prepared the modelling insert the proposed development into this model, and they've prepared a video with a few, they call them fly-throughs. So we might run that now, and it'll give you an idea of what we're looking at in a 3D real context. So this is travelling down Baker Street. This angle gives us a good look at the setbacks along Baker Street. This is the southern entrance coming in from along Point Plummer Road, being the gateway to the medium density area. This one finishes. The next one will come down the hill and gives a good angle of the building from, I believe it's Hill Street or High Street. Yeah, so you can see in that one back there that the trees on the left are at a compatible height with the building, the ones in the park there, and that it presents to the corner as part of that gateway that is discussed in the report. I've also got some images.
Madam Mayor, could we see that video again, please? Is it possible?
Yeah.
I should point out as part of this that we tried to insert the landscaping, being the screening vegetation, but predominantly the screening vegetation along the north-eastern and northwestern boundaries that will protect the neighbouring existing residential development from, particularly from views, overlooking and privacy issues. Unfortunately, the landscaping was too high a file size. And it wouldn't fit in. You'll see a lot of the vegetation in this one is kind of clumpy. It's not very well defined, and trying to put that complex landscaping they use in the 3D CAD design just didn't work. So you need to imagine that that's got the screening vegetation down the side. So the first image is showing. Oh, we lost it. Cool. The first image is shown in the to point out the setback variation. So the proposed building is set a little further forward than the existing residential structure immediately to the northeast, which has got the single story with the blue roof there. That building is set back pretty much to the 5 metre standard. The other buildings in the street, though, are set further forward. So these two and the hotel that isn't shown in that shot, the motel that's not shown in that shot, and they have a comparable front setback along the Baker Street setting to the proposal. Again, that setback is predominantly because the development was pushed away from the neighbouring houses. It was pushed out of the northern corner of the site back onto the street in order to protect those other properties, particularly with regard to privacy. And that results in, this next image is a comparison. So we've used the 3D modelling. The colours aren't quite right on that one. There was a technical issue there, but the height and whatnot is all correct. So the top image is a compliant 11 metre building. What it would look like if we, in essence, pushed it into the ground and forced that sub-basement or almost complete basement at that point. As was raised earlier, the increased ceiling heights kind of forced that basement deeper than it would have been previously. So the bottom image is the proposed, the proposal as at the height proposed at the 13.4. So the purpose of the image is to demonstrate that for the top one is height compliant, and that is again the reason why we're deciding the matter at council as opposed to under delegation. The proposal is permissible in the zone, it meets all the densities, all those things, so it's really just the matter of height and the setbacks that's in question. So yeah, the next one, so this image shows some vegetation that was on the property to the northwest. It was removed recently with consent. It was just predated the lodgement of the other application by a couple of months, just coincidental, but that vegetation is mostly gone. It's just some of the palms mostly that are left now, but we've provided this image to show what the proposed landscaping along the boundaries there will replicate in sort, not the exact species, but about the same height. They use something like lily pilly, it bushes up well and screens well. So the next one is from the common yard. This was just a good image that again shows the apartments are set back towards the corner. There's a private open space area or public common open space area in the northern corner, so that's will not shouldn't impact on the neighbours from a privacy point of view. It's all down at ground level. So the last one you've seen today already, it's the previous approval, was approved in 2005. There was construction work in 2007, which under New South Wales planning legislation is sufficient to commence the job. It no longer expires. It can sit there for another 50 years and they can start building at any time they want. So that is the current approval, and there's no legal way that we can amend or revoke that even if we so desired. So now the I'll point out that on this one, the balconies that you can see on the right and left-hand side of the image, they are, especially the lower balcony, is at a very low level and is much more likely to be, say, just above the fence height. You can look down into the neighbouring yards, and as opposed to the current proposal where that first balcony is up at a first floor level, and if anything that can be seen through the landscaping is out over roofs as opposed to down into and adjacent. Yeah, we'd have the same impact if we tried to sink in the proposal into the, enforce a basement or sub-basement level in the current proposal. You'd push those balconies down to a point where they're more likely to have an impact on the neighbour than up where they're currently proposed. Also, the street presentation in this design is quite poor. From an aerial shot that you're looking at, the garden there might not look too bad, I guess, but if you are one of these people that's down on the street, you've got a zero setback to the front boundary with a, I'm guessing, about 2.5 to 3 metre high masonry wall. That doesn't sit well with good urban design. It's not inviting or permeable in any way. So the issue with the building not being at grade and the need for a disabled ramp makes the entrance a little bit confusing as well. So I should point out that if the new proposal is adopted by council and the DA is approved, the recommendations, the recommended conditions of consent include a condition that requires the developer to surrender the existing approval, that one. So they would, in essence, give away their approval. There's no longer any chance that that one would be built. And we would end up with, rather than having two options, we would just end up with the one new proposal is the one that they'd need to proceed with into the future. So I'd just like to reinforce that, the decision-making process, that this development is predominantly compliant. If there wasn't a height variation or a setback variation, the question of whether or not a residential flat building can be on that site, the densities proposed, the traffic impacts, the parking, the solar access, all the other matters that we've discussed are all fully compliant. There'd be no grounds for refusal under any of those matters, and under our current set of delegations, no reason to be heard by the council at all. So in making a decision, try and remember that it's the height and the setbacks that is really the matters in question. So thank you.
Thank you, Shane. We have some questions. Councillor McGinn.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask the same question, if I can, of Shane that I asked the architect, just to make sure that the answer is consistent. And that is around the death by incremental change comment of the lady that spoke against the proposal. What is council's view, or what is the likelihood, and what is the likelihood of incremental changes coming back to council that sneak it up, or sneak a change, and so eventually, the fears of people is that it becomes less compliant, for want of a better word. Could you give me some comfort that council has something in place there that can't really happen?
Yes. So council's standing policy is that any LEP variation greater than 10% must be heard at full council. And that includes modifications as well. So if they came back in and they wish to increase the height of the building by another metre or half metre or 2 metres or whatever it is, they could apply for that by modification. They can apply for anything, but we would review it if we believe that it's got any merit. At the end of the day, it's all heard and decided upon by yourselves. So there could be no further height increase approved by council without being seen by at a full council meeting first.
Yes.
if it's okay, I'd like to ask the same question I asked the architect as well, to see council's view from a compliance perspective. With regards to the urban design and the concern of children's movements around the block, what is your view on the safety of children and the number of children that will be in that area, particularly at school drop-off and, school drop-off times in the mornings and afternoon? I'm looking to understand better, and I understand it's a 15-unit design versus a 15-unit design. That's the decision that we're having. Is this a more, is this a safer design? I'm looking for some comment from you, please.
Yeah, for sure. The driveway access is as far, so it's on the secondary street, it's on Kaluk, which is the lower traffic volume street. Baker Drive turns into, as you all know, turns into Point Plummer Road and has more traffic than the cul-de-sac Kaluk. The driveway is also pushed as far as possible into the western corner of the site, so it's as far away from the intersection as you can, put a driveway without acquiring neighbouring land or something like that. So it's positioned as well as can be positioned on the block. There is sufficient, as the architect said, there's sufficient visual line of sight and also distance of driveway between the development and the curb for a car to pull out and not, run into pedestrians or anything like that. And also the distance to the corner lends itself to low traffic speeds coming into the intersection. So cars turning out and presumably turning left, anyone turning right could just walk, but turning left would not get up to 50 kilometres an hour in the, I don't know what it is, it's 50 or 60 metres or something between there and the intersection. So that should keep traffic at low speeds. You've then got an intersection where they have to give way, so whether it's a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn, all the usual driving decision-making processes on the driver at that point. This all went through 2 sets of our engineers, and both very experienced people that we have, and both of them said that it was acceptable from a traffic point of view and didn't raise any specific concern on safety from pedestrian or otherwise.
Sorry, while I'm at it, I'll ask another question. Yeah. And that was about the question with regards to, and I think it's a real concern for Crescent Head. We need the housing stock in Crescent Head, but we don't want more holiday rentals. What does council do to ensure that these will become residential apartments and not holiday apartments? And I heard the architect talk that they have better, it's made more for people to live in, but what does council do in terms of compliance and regulation to try and reduce that? Or to keep it to a residential block?
Yeah. So over the last 10 years or so, this has been a very hot topic, especially you go to places like Byron Bay or Port Stephens, and they've had a lot of issues with this kind of stuff. There is a state policy that's still under being put together to give local authorities greater powers to deal with this kind of thing, but each shire is a bit different on how they take the matter of Airbnbs and the like. Our position is that you need development consent for an Airbnb. It's a type of tourist use. Currently, the proposal is for permanent residential, and the design lends itself to permanent residential, which is good. But I've had a number of the submitters and other people from Crescent Head call me and ask these questions about, will it be this, will it be that? It's hard to say that no one will try. I'd say that almost certainly at some point, there's a likelihood that someone would try and Airbnb out or rent out one of the units, but like any other use that requires development consent, we have a compliance program. Neighbours or other people in the area, due to resourcing, we do work on complaints, are very helpful to us. If we receive complaints about this kind of thing, then we will run compliance. The beautiful thing about Airbnb is once you know where one is, it's very easy to see them advertised. There's a few key websites and whatnot. So you would do your usual compliance thing, tell them to stop, and then you can follow up with fines and whatnot into the future if they don't. So Yeah, that would be our actions going forward.
So, just to clarify for me, so you're saying to me, or am I hearing you correctly, say that this is meant to be a residential building, and to as much as we can do about it, Kempsey Council will ensure within its ability that it will remain residential and not be a holiday block.
So
have I got words in your mouth?
No, not quite. Tourist uses are permitted in some areas, but they require consent. So if someone wanted to use one of those for tourists, they would have to come in and actually apply for that. There's a whole range of issues associated with tourist users, with the extra parking and the noise and everything else. So it's not something that just goes in and out, and it's a matter of filling out the paperwork and we'll give you a stamp. If someone illegally uses one of the units as a tourist use, then we are made aware of it, or we become aware of it, then we will run compliance action against them, and they'll be required to stop or face fines and prosecution in the usual manner. So, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Horville and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Shane, for your presentation.
I
have a question about the basement that was in the original design. Did you have an estimation of the cost to the developer of putting in that basement?
In the
original design,
the 2005, or the original version of the one that came in last year?
The original version.
Through Madam Mayor, the question, the staff wouldn't have that detailed information, and it's actually not relevant to the consideration of council at what's actually before council now. That's relating to a previous DA.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Well, I'll ask you to look at page 15, which talks about the applicant has addressed construction feasibility as the approved residential flat building has a below ground car park. And it talks about the shallow water table. And it says construction feasibility and ongoing maintenance are themselves not grounds to support a variation request, but another factor to consider. So why should we be considering, Shane, the cost of the developer putting in a basement?
Sorry, I've lost we're on page 15?
Page 15, second paragraph. It talks about the construction feasibility. General Manager says we shouldn't be talking about the cost, but it is here in the staff notes to councillors.
Yeah, I mean they're all factors to take into consideration. What I'm saying, if it was the only factor was just that it's going to cost a lot of money to do something, then we don't generally give variations on those grounds alone. So you add that to the long-term maintenance issues, the high water table, the flooding impacts, and it's another matter to take under consideration. So I've had experience with basement level car parks in sandy soil and with high water tables before. I've spoken to, on different jobs, this one didn't propose to go down, so there was no need to do it on this one, but on different jobs I've spoken to Officer Water, who require permits from them to penetrate the water table in other areas, and you know, they're very much recommend against it. It creates a lot of complexity, so that's from state government agencies responsible for that kind of thing. So you add that in with the flooding issues, the maintenance issues and all the rest of it, and all those things together form grounds.
Thank you. So would you be able to say that it's possibly in the order of millions of dollars to put that basement in?
It'd be very hard for me to estimate that. It's
Through you again, Madam Mayor. Mr. Reinhold's actually a planner. He's not a quality surveyor, so he wouldn't be in a position to actually answer that.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Patterson.
Well, Madam Mayor, I have some more questions, but to Mr. General Manager, I was told on the inspection that there was a cost given to council staff, so I just thought the general public, in order of open and transparency, that they should be told there's an extra cost with the construction of a basement. And that's in the, as I said on page 15, there is an extra cost.
There may be, and there may be information that the planners have in relation to that, but you're asking a planner to give you an answer from a quantity surveyor, and he's not a quantity surveyor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. So we then have the next paragraph there that we're looking at a future desired intensity of the medium density area. Is it in any council plans that we wish to increase the density in the KLEP or the CDP? Is there any policy of council saying that we wish to increase the density of people living in that section of Crescent Head?
Yes. The current zoning of the land is the R3 medium density zone. The corresponding densities in the current development control plan this development complies with them. It's the current densities permit this number of units at these number of bedrooms to be constructed upon that land. So it's not a future desire. This has been in place for quite some time. There's a few decades involved ago that it was rezoned medium density.
So it's not a future desire, but it is written in the staff notes to us.
It's the current desire to be the future development of that land.
Yeah. Through Madam Mayor, I think that just to clarify that point, my reading of that is when they're talking about future desire, the current land that is zoned medium density is not constructed in medium density at the moment. It's actually either not constructed on it at all, or it is just low density. So the future desire is to actually have that constructed. So my reading of that is that the future desired intensity is to actually see medium density constructed in the medium density zone.
Yeah, that's correct. That's how it's intended, is that the current plans clearly outline the desire for that level of density in that area in the future.
Thank you. I'm trying to get my iPad to work.
Well, we'll take Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I get it working, I'll tell you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got about 4 or 5 points. I'm not asking you.
No debate, Councillor. Just questions.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. I can actually.
It's a big move by the owners at the moment.
Jump me to there.
If we had that, can we get the picture up on the screen at all of the current DA, please?
I think it's the last picture in the file.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a big move to me as someone who could, look at possibly buying a unit that they've turned the unit block around and actually taken away the north-facing balconies, which could have direct facing to the ocean views and westerly getting the sun. To me, it's a big move.
Question, Councillor.
So, well, based on the general manager saying about these guys aren't estimators, I believe it's a big move financially, possibly equaling the off cost of putting a basement car park in the loss of value, having north facing balconies and living areas.
Yeah.
We need your question, Councillor.
Okay, the height compared to the existing blocks of flats down the end of Kyluk Street, the actual height, the roof height, not the actual height off the ground. Is this new proposal higher than those existing flats?
We had to estimate, but it's about the same.
Okay.
It looks like we're working with files from the 80s.
Yep.
They're notoriously thin on information, but what we could get out of it is that the buildings down the end
Yep.
were probably in the range of about 12 to 12.5 metres high.
Yeah.
We're fairly confident on that. And then the slope of the ground as it slopes up props them up another metre to a metre and a half off the ground. So they are, the buildings down the end of Kyluk are very similar in height, possibly even higher. It's really difficult to tell, especially again back in the 80s, what was approved by the planner and what was agreed for construction on site by the builder varied around a fair bit. So but it's about the same, give or take.
Was the restriction back then just set on 3 levels, no actual height, but just 3 levels?
And that's correct. The restriction back then was 3-storey. We've changed that since in the last 5 or 6 years to a meterage, because putting it solely on stories, people get very creative with exactly how tall a story is and how high you're going to make your ceiling and everything else. So it was resulting in a lot of outcomes that were hard to control. So the overall meterage provides a bit more of a it's a better control, more accurate control. Yeah.
So in essence, it's not really won't be the highest building in the area.
It's about equal to the ones down the end of the street. Yeah, yeah.
So the Crescent Head has an actual fairly useful protection policy for protecting the view of those houses being built up on the hill with views of the ocean and the westerly views of the bush, etc. Does this come into those restrictions at all? The proposed DA?
Yeah, we reviewed view sharing as part of this one. I think I spoke about it very quickly in the report because there was no issues, and the reason that end of town, that western end of town, in essence, is the one that's zoned medium density, is because to put higher buildings in the centre, down in the village centre, blocks out numerous people behind and creates all kinds of issues, and we're forever having a lot of issues with view sharing and access at Crescent Head. So being located on the flat ground over in the western portion of Crescent Head gives it basically protects everybody from those views. So everyone in the amphitheatre, so to say, of the bowl type thing of Crescent Head still maintains all their ocean views. And by the time you get to those, I'm not familiar with all the names, but those cul-de-sacs that come up off Baker Drive or Point Plummer Road to the south of this development, they're not maintaining the views over to. They're kind of getting their views. The ones that have them are kind of over the hill to the north more. So yeah, we did review that, and it was squeaky clean.
Just looking at the back set from the northern boundary on this current DA, where does the building start in relation to the boundary? This current DA.
The current DA, where does the building start?
Yeah.
I believe it's about 6 metres. Yeah.
That current. Sorry to put him on the spot.
This is the setback to the. Yeah. It might have been 5 point.
So that's not from the road frontage. It'll be from the neighbours with the blue roof that you showed us before.
So the
setback on that side from the boundary.
The current development application that's being decided today.
Yeah.
From memory, it was 5.3 or 5.4 from the fence, and it was about 6 to the actual house.
So this current DA that's approved, I believe that building's within 1 metre of that fence boundary.
I'm not sure. I thought it was quite close. The architect before made a comment that it was set back a bit further than I believed it was. But I'm not sure if that's to the wall or the balcony either. I'm afraid I don't have that plan on me. Sorry.
Yep. And just one last thing. Do you believe, because it was brought up about the holiday traffic affecting the school areas, do you believe that school kids are on holidays in the holidays? So the school would be shut.
Hope so.
Councillor Horville.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've kind of got it working again. Ain't technology wonderful? Thank you, Shane. Your earlier question from Councillor McGinn talking about people using the residential expected use but changing it to Airbnb or tourist rental. When they come in to council to change it over, is there a blanket stoppage for this building by council to say, no, you can't rent it out, or in due process they would be allowed to change the use of the building from residential or from their apartment from residential to rental?
So we don't have any prohibition in Crescent Head at the moment for tourist rentals or Airbnbs or anything like that. That's something for strategy and
so
councillors to decide.
Pay a fee and it will be approved.
So there's a variety of issues associated with tourists. A lot of the things that have been identified: the additional parking requirements, noise issues, especially at night. The additional traffic movements. Tourists are expected to come and go a bit more often than permanent residentials. And so you go through and you have to assess all those things. It's quite often that they won't have sufficient parking, for example, to do that tourist use. They say, well, we want to get a tourist use for an existing house. We want to put 6 people in there. Maybe you need 3 parking spaces instead of 1 or something like that. Just off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the actual rates are, but you need to overcome a variety of those matters. So I can't speculate whether or not they'd ever be allowed to do any tourist use in there in this particular building, but if they were, it's one of the problems with the Airbnb come with the huge number of tourists you get. You get a little house and they cram 15 people into them. You're just not going to get that legally with the parking provided. Most of the units have 1 space each.
So the issue at Crescent Head, according to the Crescent Head Area Master Plan, is that the high proportion of rentals and Airbnb buildings that are only occupied on holidays, and as you say, they pack people in during the holidays, and that's an issue. You're saying that in this particular building, council just has a general policy about who can change to Airbnb or rental, but there's no possibility of council putting a condition upon the building that it only be residential. We can't put that in?
So at the moment, the proposed use is only for residential, permanent residential. So you could impose a condition like that. Strictly speaking, under planning law, it's not necessary because they haven't applied for it. So if you want to get into the nitty gritty of case law and what judges say is an appropriate condition and not an appropriate condition, they would say it's not needed because it's not what's been proposed. The same reason you wouldn't have a condition in there about it's not to be used as a industry or a commercial use or something. It's not necessary because they haven't got it in there. So, but every now and then those kinds of conditions are applied, and if you wanted to apply for certainty, then they might not appeal it. So it's up to you.
Councillors, could I just add to Mr. Reinhold's earlier comment just regarding Airbnbs? The state government are working in that space at the moment. We did provide a response to a question on notice. I think it was in the last council meeting agenda regarding Airbnbs. Guidance during the course of this year is likely, which I guess will assist us in our future direction in how Airbnb and similar type accommodation is actually managed.
Could I ask my final question, Madam Mayor, please? All councillors have received this email, and it makes an allegation about Development Control Plan 2013, Chapter C1, and it talks about street setbacks. And street set in section 5.2.1.e, it states a maximum of 1.5 metres reduction to 3.5 metres in a primary street setback can only be granted if the encroachment relates to an enclosed structure. Now, this is not an enclosed, unenclosed structure, I should say, like a carport that could come in within. So, are we contravening that part of the Development Control Plan as well?
So what that does is it's more, that section's an enabling clause as opposed to a restrictive clause. What that section of the DCP does is it provides some leniency for things like porticos or carports, as you've said, where you don't need to specifically request a variation from council if your carport or your portico sticks out the front of your house inside that setback. You know, as you're going in and as you're designing it, that it's going to be okay, and the council's accepting of that. So in this case, because the proposed variation to the DCP is unenclosed, as you've identified, we're more just dealing with the actual setback itself, the variation request.
The variation is supported by staff that they encroach in that setback zone.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you very much, Shane.
No problems.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Shane. And thank you, Graham. Okay, we have a recommendation. We have it moved. We have it seconded.
Madam Mayor, may I ask some questions of the General Manager, please?
Certainly.
I'd love to ask the questions. I have it written here on Docs on Tap. Maybe I should have written it out. Mr. General Manager, I presume we're not allowed to know who the directors or owners of the DA or the applicant?
I'd have to take the advice from the planning staff. Haven't never been asked that before, so yeah.
I'm about to show the relevance, and you're going to be quite amazed. Okay.
The owner is a company named Bellowing Proprietary Limited.
And we're not allowed to know who the directors are?
I'm not sure who the directors are. We don't get into that level of detail. In the application, we have a there's one of the owners has been a contact over the application, but yeah, the applicant is Buck and Simple,
Yep.
and the owner is Bellowing Proprietary Limited.
Okay, so I've finished. Thanks, Shane. I'll just finish asking my question of the General Manager. If one of the directors, Mr. General Manager, has a contract that's operating at the moment with council, we're working for council, I won't specify what sort of work, would that be a conflict? And for a start, if you don't know about it, you can't see there's a conflict, but would you know who the directors are yourself?
No, I didn't even know who the company was, so no, not at all. And given that the actual applicant is the architectural company, then that's who the applicant is, and that's the relationship council has. So I wouldn't see a conflict of interest.
Right. I thought I might make sure of that. Thank you. Many submissions, Mr. General Manager, and there was something like 24 submissions against it, and 207 people signed a petition. They mention the Crescent Head area master plan not being followed. In the actual document from staff, that's only mentioned twice. Should there have been more consideration of the area amenity in that report?
The council staff have presented a very thorough and detailed report to council, and I'm very, very happy with the content that they have provided and the information that's in that report.
Thank you. Right, so thank you very much, General Manager, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me ask those questions.
Thank you. Is there any debate? I put the...
No, Madam Mayor, I'd like to speak against.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'd love to be able to jump. Oh, what am I doing wrong? This is true. I agree with you. Technology kills you, though. Found it. Okay. Got it. So the recommendation is that we approve this. Well, a bit like the robot in Lost in Space, danger Will Robinson, have the years to come out. I think there's quite a danger for council in that we have, in the recommendations, going to go against 4 areas of the local environment plan, the apartment design guide and the council's flood management guide. We are going against those set guidelines. Now, I'm just quite amazed that we can have so many variations. The height, which is 2.4 metres higher than the required area for that area in the local environment plan 2013, it's 22% above, and it's above the flood ground level due to the flood policy. So it's 1.6 metres now required above ground level due to flood policy, says that the height of the building must start at 1.6 metres above the fixed ground level. So you add another 1.6 metres, you're going to get or 4 metres higher than the allowed height, which is 11 metres in that area. So number one, the height of the building is a major variation. It's not a minor variation, it's a minor variation like the one we approved for Southwest Rocks, which was 30 centimetres above the required height for that area. We're approving one that's possibly up to 4 metres higher than allowed.
I'll take that. Thank you, councillors.
No,
Please
I haven't finished speaking, Madam Mayor.
Stick to the facts.
I am sticking to the facts that are printed.
Yes, you can.
Number
But
two.
when we're after the councillor's finished.
Number two recommendation is that we vary the street setbacks, which is on Baker Drive, it's going to be vary from 5 metre setback to 2.2 metres, which is 54% less than allowed. Kaluki Crescent, it's 3 metres back to 2.1 metres, which is less than, is 30% less than what it should be. The side setback out the side to the boundary, it's been reduced from 6 metres to 5 metres, which is a 17% variation. But variation after variation being proposed to be allowed with this motion. The number three, variations of the apartment design guide regarding building separation and living room widths. There are 3.5 metres width in 4 units, which is 12.5% less than the 4 metres minimum. The minimum for an apartment has been set as the minimum, not, oh, well, let's keep going below it. Let's make an apartment 2 metres wide or 3 metres wide. At what point do you say enough is enough? Well, I'm saying that 4 metres is enough. Point four, requested variation of council flood management policy regarding single residential occupancy restrictions and structural engineer certificate be supported. The variation is, the policy says 1 residence on that land because of flooding. 1 residence, we're putting 15. If you want to have fun with maths, that's 1,500% variation. I'll show you the maths later if you like, Councillor McGinn.
Continue.
Yes, I'm just about to finish up, Madam Mayor. So there are 4 major variations, and we have all these submissions against it. It's going to affect people at Crescent Head. Despite what the architect thinks, I think it's ugly, but that's just a subjective view. But
stick to arguing the point, councillor.
I'm arguing it really well, Madam Mayor. I'm bringing up all the facts. So it's a fact that I don't like.
Don't be subjective, just stick to the 5 points.
It's objective that I'm subjective. So thanks, Madam Mayor. I really find that if we are going to vary this development, then any other development in the area are going to come in with the same height variations, the same setback variations. We are approving ongoing changes to our planning. KLEP 2013, chuck it out. It's not going to be followed. The CDP, or what's it called, the Kempsey Development Control Plan 2013, no longer relevant. Chuck it out, because we are going to allow major variations in those policies. The planners knew that these were the policies. The developer wants to develop it, and I'm suggesting it will be a financial benefit to the developer to have this DA approved.
Thank you, councillor. That's your time.
We should vote against this. Madam Mayor, thank you for...
Thank you, councillor Baxter. Are you speaking for or against?
For. Can I bring up the last picture, please, Chair? In speaking for, I'd like to highlight to the previous, my fellow councillor, the debate is whether we have this block of 15 flats or we have the other block of 15 flats. The time of saying we want a third perfect block of flats isn't before us. It's this block of flats or new proposal. This block of flats, I'm saying, I agree, is inferior in the sense that you don't get the tree line of privacy. You don't get the new ceiling heights. You don't get the benefit. The other block of flats to me is much more beneficial. The only drawback, and I've spoken to the house concerned, the 2 or 3 weeks of shade on Madeleine's house is a drawback. I agree, and it's a pity. But then if you look at the bigger picture, we do need more people in Crescent Head. So for the people that are saying, no, we don't want any block of flats there, we just want a house there, I think they're denying us an opportunity to bring some families into the village. We've got 200, we've gone from 150 holiday houses in the village to over 250, and the trend continues. So the village is being gutted, as it were. We're losing permanent residents. So the opportunity for 15 families or 15 new residents, and if we can bring in regulations, if the council can enforce that it is residential. But looking at the arguments between the two options, and we only have 2 options, whether I think the new proposal is the superior one. You're getting more privacy for the neighbours on the both boundary fences. So, given we've just got a choice between these 2, I think I'm saying that the second option is the superior one.
Thank you, Councillor.
There isn't a third option.
The Director would like to say something. Yes? And maybe answer some of those questions.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I'll just add a couple of comments in relation to what Councillor Horville has said. In terms of the local environment plan, there are provisions within the LEP that allow consideration to vary development standards, and depending on the level of variation as to whether that can be done under delegation by staff or may require reporting to council, as is in the case in this instance where it's obviously a larger variation. In terms of the height, as listed in the report, the variation sought is for 2.4 metres, as per Mr. Reinhold's comment. If that was sought to be any higher, it would obviously have to come back to council. And I'd also refer to the architect's comments that there have been provisions made in the design of the building in terms of the slab thicknesses, etc., to obviously enable the building to be built within that designed height that's shown on the plans that are in the report. There is quite a bit of information obviously related to each of the variations in the report, so I don't think I need to reiterate that, but specifically related to setbacks, the current proposal certainly came about through trying to reduce some of the impacts on neighbouring properties. So the reduction in setback actually provides some benefits to the properties that actually neighbour the development. The minimum design widths of the apartments, there is also information in the report in that regard. Those that are less than what's in the apartment design guide are typically longer, thinner living areas, and there are some circumstances such as your large windows and balconies, etc., that I guess mitigate or provide an acceptable reason to vary that particular standard. And the last one being the flood management policy. The development as proposed, all habitable areas are above the flood planning level. It's only the car parking level that's at the lower level, which would be subject to inundation. I'd also note that there's large areas of the Crescent Head village that are not flood prone, and this development is on a flood fringe area, so there's certainly your appropriate evacuation and emergency response measures that can be implemented at this particular location. The actual requirements are probably more related to some of our floodplain areas such as Smithtown and Gladstone. So there's obviously adequate ability to seek refuge if that was required, but in reality the habitable areas are above the flood planning level anyway.
Thank you. No further debate. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against the recommendation? The recommendation's been carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 11. We're going back to item 11.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural motion.
Which is?
Yes, I'd like to move that we pick up from the table the motion that I moved 15.1 with a purpose to investigate the trigger point of that what will be required from the state government installing an interchange on Crescent Head Road and the Pacific Motorway, and we send a letter to the Premier of New South Wales, the Honourable Ms Gladys Berejiklian MP, member for Miller-Willoughby, requesting she have the Roads and Maritime Services investigate the trigger point factors for an interchange to be installed at the juncture of Crescent Head Road and the Pacific Motorway. That one, the letter requests a reply outlining the trigger point. 2, council and the community should be informed of any replies as soon as possible or as soon as received. And 3, when there is a response, council is to be provided with a separate report with recommendations for determination on any possible further action. So I move that we pick that up from the table.
Just a moment, I need a seconder. Do I have a seconder? Okay, it's lapsed. No one wants to second it? Do you want to second it, councillor? No, not unless this is seconded. So you can second it if you want to and then move your foreshadowed, but no, it's lapsed. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to consideration of consensus motion.
Just a typo. On mine it says the residential flat building at Crescent Head, so 13.4 needs changing.
Yes.
It should be prior circuit, yep.
Yes.
Yep, happy to second that.
So the consensus motion, you're moved it, councillor? You've
I'd like to
seconded it?
withdraw some, Madam Mayor. I'll never get to it.
Withdrawal?
Yes, I'd like to withdraw 13.3, 13.4, 13.5, 13.8, 20.1 and 20.3. Oh, and 17.1, sorry. 17.1, Local Traffic Committee.
And these are for changing the recommendation, councillor, or are you asking questions?
I hope to change them, Madam Mayor, with support.
Thank you, councillor. Okay. 13.3, yeah, sorry, 13.7.
6, 7, 9, and 20.2 and 20.2.
All in favour of the recommendation? All against? All in favour of the consensus motion? You've got no choice, councillors. All against?
Why is the iPad doing this?
13.3. Oh, sorry, we're at 13.1, which is Verge's. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Patterson. 13.1 is Virgin Eden Street Sporting and Complex Draft Master Plan to put it on public exhibition. Any debate?
Yes, Madam Mayor, could I ask a question, please?
Sorry? Yeah, we have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To whoever wants to answer it, in the master plan, have there been full consideration of flooding in the development of those buildings?
Through Madam Mayor, yes.
Thank you. I put the recommendation.
Now, Madam Mayor, I'm moving an amendment, which I'm pretty sure will elapse, but I'm moving it anyway. That Council write a letter to Premier Daly, if elected, to commit to implement the required funding as promised by local member for Oxley. So if we're to change the government, we send a letter asking him to commit to the funding as well.
This funding doesn't rely on that,
Yeah,
does it?
through Madam Mayor, what council staff have been doing with the election process is any pre-election commitment that our local MP is making, we're already writing to the Labor candidate asking that those matters be picked up by the Labor Party as well. So we're doing that just as a matter of course.
Well, my amendment is to write directly to the Premier if he's elected and confirm it.
The amendment's lapsed. All in favour of the recommendation? All against?
Will
Fantastic.
That amendment be put in? Thank you.
13.3. Do I have a...
I'm trying to get there, Madam Mayor.
It's the rock fishing one.
Yes, that's the one I withdrew. I'll get to it. I don't know what page it's on. I'll not win with this machine. No?
So it's been moved by Councillor Shield, seconded by Councillor Patterson.
I can't find it. Sorry, Madam Mayor.
It's page 24.
Full page.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, now I've got to it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
It's also on your screen in front of you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been moved and seconded, I presume, Madam Mayor. I would like to amend it.
And your amendment?
The amendment is to read the recommendation as is without the two nots in it. So the new amendment will be the council participate in the Rock Fishing Safety Initiative program and have the coastline of the Kempsey Shire LGA declared an area where life jackets are mandatory in accordance with the Rock Fishing Safety Act.
It's a foreshadowed motion. It's a direct opposite.
Is it? I'm sorry.
It's a foreshadowed motion,
I accept your
Councillor.
direction, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favour of the the recommendation?
So I'll put a foreshadowed motion. Does that get written?
All against? You've just foreshadowed one,
Okay, so I'm against it. Right.
Yeah, so that's been carried. Item 13.4. That's prior circuit. Moved Councillor Patterson, seconded Councillor McGinn. It was withdrawn for some reason.
Yes, I withdraw it because I wish to speak against it, Madam Mayor.
Yes. So you want to speak against it, or you just
Yes,
want to
Madam
vote
Mayor,
against it?
I want to speak against it.
Okay.
Right, the variation in this one, as it goes back to the previous debate, is below the minimum standard of the Kempsey Local Environment Plan 2013.
Point of order, Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Which says 500 square
Can you take it out
metres.
just to speak against it? I thought you could
You
only
would,
take it out to change the
You would have to
motion,
take it
the
out because you
resolution.
would be voting against it, and then you'd have to vote against all the consensus items.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, yes, if you're going to vote against something, you have to take it out.
I may
Thank you.
start again. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm voting against this, and I would like my fellow councillors to consider this again, that we're supporting the variation to the KLEP, the Kempsey Local Environment Plan 2013, which says a minimum block size is 500 square metres, and this block is 380 something square metres, so it's well below the KLEP. There is a standard variation allowed in planning of a 10% variation, which 10% of 500 is 50 square metres, so it could have been 450 square metres and not have to be bought here, but the variation is greater than that. And I know some of you said, well, we've given permission for variations before, but at some point, under planning, we should say, well, we have the rules, let's follow them. And the rule says you cannot do this. What's the purpose of supporting it? It's going to give money to the person who wants to subdivide, but when they bought that block of land, they should have known the rules, and now that they've got on in years and they've lived there for a while, they want to sell it and make some money. Good on them, that's their retirement plan, but it's not up to council to support a retirement plan, and so therefore I'm asking you to consider voting against this DA because it buries the KLEP again. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against? 13.5, there is a recommendation. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor McGinn. Any debate?
I have a question.
Put a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the staff report, it says, second last paragraph, it talks, the concept plan was released to the public by the member for Oxley, Melinda Pavey MP, when announcing the grant, and was displayed at a subsequent meeting of the Stuarts Point and District Community Organisation. My question is, when were councillors given access to the concept plan? Was that before or after the announcement?
Through Madam Mayor, I'd have to come back with that. I'm not familiar with the exact timeframes on all of that.
I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against? 13.8. Thank you, councillor. Seconded, councillor. You're not?
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question, please?
Yes, you may.
I'm concerned about the council as a Crown lease operator getting money from leasing it. So, first of all, I'm a bit concerned that we're going to give or consider negotiating with the South West Rocks Country Club on them managing the area and therefore managing the new building which will be put there under this great plan. So what is the present income from the lease of the golf course by council of that Crown lease land?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I believe it's in the vicinity of about $5,000 or $6,000 per year.
And just point out to councillors that that actually isn't really relevant to what's actually before council in terms of the recommendations.
Well, I'm looking towards amending it, Madam, Mr. General Manager, in trying to find out if any way we can get a higher income from this facility, which we at the moment don't have any income. So through you, Madam Mayor, I'd like to ask the General Manager, will that be part of the negotiations, or do we need a direction from council to staff?
The negotiations will be in line with the council resolution.
Yeah, the resolution doesn't actually call for a higher or trying to get a higher income stream from this area, Mr. General Manager.
No, the resolution is actually, if it passed, will authorise the General Manager to negotiate a draft agreement that would include whatever fees you may get, and the leasing or whatever arrangement will actually be a management agreement for this area. The golf club lease is a totally different lease and totally different matter to the actual arrangement for managing this particular facility. My experience with management arrangements for these sorts of facilities is that yeah, if you can get some of your costs covered, you're doing very well. It's not something where you're going to have a large profit centre.
And this has nothing to do with the golf club. This is about the sports complex.
No, Madam Mayor, I was asking about the golf club.
The golf course.
The golf course. I was asking about that because it's managed by the South West Rocks Country Club, and if they are going to manage this other area, if we negotiate with them, I'm looking to see any way we could support the General Manager in negotiation to make sure that we get an income stream out of this, if at possible.
I put the recommendation. All in favour? Yes, certainly.
Just to the General Manager, if I might ask, what's the likely term of a lease? What's the standard? Or
Yeah, that's something like this. Given the nature of it, you're probably looking at 5 by 5, that sort of thing. Again, this is an unusual situation given it goes over 2 properties, but yeah, we'd be looking at least a 5 by 5.
And so within such a lease, I'm thinking when you determine it, and I
It's
know
actually not a lease, it'll actually be a management agreement.
management agreement, so that if in fact the performance isn't appropriate, that's part of the management agreement that maybe someone else could manage it. So I'm
That's correct.
just managing the risk here.
Yeah, there's certainly be performance criteria in it, and I've been in situations where we've actually terminated management agreements and gone to other sources to actually manage facilities.
I put the recommendation. Oh, Councillor Patterson, did you have a question?
Oh, there is a question. I just this high performance sports centre, which would be open to all users, I'm guessing. The delivery to the public for this facility on an ongoing basis is a huge return to the council. I just want to make that point.
Thank you, Councillor. I put the recommendation. All in favour of the recommendation? All against? It's been carried. 17.1, there is a recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. You moving that? Yes. Okay, thank you, Councillor Shields. It was withdrawn, so someone either wants to change. Councillor Horville.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I have some questions and a possible change to the recommendation.
I don't know if it's a point of order or what it is, but we can't change other than to adopt the minutes of the traffic committee.
We've been through this every meeting that a traffic committee meeting comes up.
You might hear the amendment first, Madam Mayor and Councillor McGinn. At the moment, the minutes show that Councillor Williams, the Deputy Mayor, was not in attendance, and for me, knowing that the Mayor has lots of expertise in this area, I'm wondering why we don't have an alternate. So my amendment would be that we elect an alternate or delegate the Mayor to attend the meeting, Madam Mayor.
With the traffic committee, there is the ability to participate via email, which the police often do, which we often do. I don't know whether Councillor Williams was aware of that or whether he in actual fact did participate through email. In my view, there really isn't a need for an alternative.
Through the Mayor, it's also not Council's committee, and you'd have to go back to what the actual terms of reference that may not actually permit alternates either.
Well, Madam Mayor, thank you. Well, informally, would you or the General Manager be able to find out whether we need an alternate if there's issues that need dealing with, like the Southwest Rocks triathlon?
The only thing I can say is, Councillor, I was on that committee before I was a councillor. I think I've served on that committee for over 10 years, and at no stage did I ever think there needed to be an alternative, if that answers your question.
Right. My question to Director Fish, through you, Madam Mayor, could we have an update on the proposed removal of 2 car parking spaces in the CBD at Southwest Rocks, which the concern raised, but it's in the minutes. So I'm just wondering whether that can be referred back to the Traffic Committee if there is an issue that can be resolved.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. One of our staff members recently met with a few of the local businesses at that location, which is essentially the outcome of that was that there was concern with the removal of those two car spaces by those businesses. We are now taking that up with RMS to seek to enable those car spaces to remain, with obviously the implementation of the outcome of the traffic committee meeting in terms of the 10-kilometre zone at that location.
Thank you, Director Fish. Can you or Mr. Director Fish tell me how in 3.4 of the minutes, which was concerned with increasing the speed limit on Ravenswood Road from 80 kilometres an hour to 100 kilometres an hour, how did the committee discern that there was a need to increase the speed by 20 kilometres an hour?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Council, I have to take that on notice, not being present at the meeting. I'm not aware of the conversation that occurred, but I can certainly get that feedback to you.
Thank you. And finally, the report, the minutes show that sections of Tozer Street are going to be included in the 40 km/h speed zone. Maybe Councillor Patterson might be able to tell me this, or tell the meeting this. What parts of Tozer Street are going to be dropped from 50 to 40? Because it's not in the actual minutes, it's not very specific.
Madam Mayor, do you want me to answer? Then direct.
It's item 3.9.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. My understanding is it's the section basically fronting council here.
This one?
Yeah, the immediate business blocks, and possibly the other side of Elbow Street as well. So it's in the main business area only.
So right down to Marsh Street?
Yeah. Sorry?
It's right to Marsh Street?
I'd assume it would go quite close to that, yes. I'll have to go and get that exactly clarified for you, but it's the reason for it relates to the parking areas and being in the main business area.
Okay.
Similar to what's in place for Elbow Street.
Yeah. So will the public be informed of this change in council matters or whatever, so people know that we are trying to make it a more safe, or a safer zone for pedestrians?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we could certainly look at that. It's not a major change, given that there already is 40 km/h provisions in the area, but we can consider as to whether that's necessary or not.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that we put the motion.
You don't have to do that, councillor. I'll put the recommendation. All in favour?
Aye.
All against? Thank you. Oh, no, we don't. We have councillor questions. Councillor Patterson. Councillor.
I have two questions and I'll pass them over, Donna, after this. What is the progress of the sporting field expansion in Southwest Rocks? And the second question is, the community has questioned why the replacement of the Back Creek footbridge is not starting until June. Could council please explain the process involved in replacing the footbridge?
I'm taking out question 3,
Councillor.
which I've just sent through.
Councillor Horville.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Question 1. Has there been any progress in working with the New South Wales Police to enhance their access to live streams of Kempsey Shire Council's closed circuit television? Question 2. Has it been a coincidence or anticipation by council staff of the possible council name change that has established the usage of Macleay Valley Food Bowl, Macleay Valley Economic and Tourist Strategy, and usage of the domain name of the Shire Council email as Macleay Valley Council for its mail server? It's now changed. Question 3. Is it considered to be good... No, question 3 I've deleted. Thank you. It's not necessary. Question 4. In regard to the agreement between Kempsey Shire Council and the Australian International Aviation College, signed on the 16th of July 2018, why has AIAC not complied with section 27, which state AIAC must give council the following billing information: A, the number of aircraft landing per day; B, the identity of which aircraft has landed; and has not complied with section 29, which says AIAC must give the billing information to council within 7 days of each calendar year quarter, ending on the 31st of March, 30th of June, 30th of September and 31st of December. Final question. What action are proposed by council to rectify this non-compliance as found in question 4?
Yes, I guess it should have alleged. Thank you, councillors. We are now going to go into confidential, so we will need... you moved to go into confidential. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor McGinn. We need to now clear the gallery. Thank you, people.